we feel like we live in reality.
Yeah.
But imagine wearing glasses that are black and white, and then you take off the glasses and you see everything in color. What would you say is more of a reality? Not the black and white glasses.
Right.
So when people come back and they say, it's so hard to describe, but it was more real than this, that's what they mean. We are so limited. Our brain capacity is limited. All of our senses are limited compared to what they experience there, and they feel like it's at home. The adulteress, when the Pharisees found the woman was an adulteress, they picked up stones, and Jesus said, let he without sin cast the first stone. Yet he did tell her, go and sin no more. Hey, clean up your act a little bit.
Sure.
So
he's pointing out the hypocrisy.
Yeah, so Yahweh's solution is to pick up boulders, throw them at her head and her ribs and her kneecaps until she bleeds to death or gets knocked out. Pick up the biggest boulder you can find and crush her skull with it. So, that's Yahweh's solution. And Jesus said, you know what? I have a better solution. So his grandmother took him to the village, and the 3-year-old stopped her and ran right up to the old house where the same family was living. And they confirmed that their son had died 5 years earlier on his bike on the way to school. They described that he was shot in the back of the head with a large exit wound in the front of his head. The 3-year-old boy had birthmarks both in those locations, with a larger birthmark in the front of the head.
He had birthmarks where the previous soul experience got shot.
Yes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming back for another episode of the Why Can't We Talk About That podcast. As you can see from the title, today is a special bonus episode, which means that the normal format will not be followed. A few weeks ago, I released an episode with Ryan Edwards, and I received many questions and comments about that discussion. If you have not yet listened to that episode, I strongly suggest doing so before listening to this one, as this episode is the second part of that conversation. And at this point, it looks like there will definitely be a third, and possibly even a fourth. Towards the end of the episode, I asked him a few of the questions that were sent to me by listeners. However, there's a certain kind of comment that I would like to address right now, just because the lines might have been crossed at some point with certain people. Since Ryan is a person who formerly believed in traditional Christianity, and no longer does, he obviously has some critiques of that belief system, and it seems that this was upsetting to some of you. Because of this, I just wanted to make something clear. This is not a Christian show. And when I say that, this is not a cop-out or me attempting to not take a stand on my own beliefs. Anyone who listens to these conversations knows that I am very much a Christian and that I do not hide from those beliefs. I will defend my beliefs for as long as they are defensible. However, the purpose of this show is for people of all walks of life and all belief systems to be able to express their points of view in a non-hostile environment and to share their reasons for why they believe what they believe. Again, for those that have been listening to this show, you know that I am not afraid to push back on people's beliefs, and that I also welcome my guests to push back on my beliefs. I'm not afraid of critique, and I don't think anyone should be. If your own beliefs are flimsy enough that they are in danger of being destroyed by someone else's studies or information, then my advice to you is to seriously examine your own beliefs. Because if what we believe can be disproven, then we should allow it to be disproven and move on to a more defensible belief. We should not run for the hills any time that someone has different beliefs or is even attempting to argue against our beliefs. I hope that this makes sense. If not, please contact me and I will try to do a better job of explaining. Which reminds me to tell you that I would appreciate any and all feedback you may have. You can contact me at whycan'twetalkaboutthat at proton.me. This is the same email address you would use if you wanted to let me know if you, or anyone else you know, would like to be a guest on the show. And as always, please leave a review from wherever you are listening from. And since the show is now on YouTube, please subscribe to the Why Can't We Talk About That YouTube channel. Thanks! As already mentioned, this is a part 2, so we just jump right in where we left off. We get into so many fascinating areas of discussion, dealing with things like quantum physics and near-death experiences. I hope that you will enjoy the conversation.
Well, I did want to get into other stuff.
Yeah, well, we gotta finish where you left off anyway, right?
Yeah, that's where I want to start.
Yeah.
I have a lot of notes, so it was hard looking at my phone, so I brought a little laptop.
Do it up, man. Use all the space you need here. I can even back these up a little bit.
There's no way we can
Do you need a plug?
do all this in just one more episode.
Yeah, man. Maybe every couple months we'll just do an episode with you. It'll be like, oh, special bonus episode, Ryan Edwards, you know?
Yeah, once a month. So, you know, there's verses, stories, studies, case studies, references.
Yeah.
Stuff
Yeah.
I didn't care to try to memorize. No way.
Yeah.
I'm beyond that.
Is your memory worse now than it used to be, or better?
It's a little worse.
Okay. I meet people that are older and they say their memory gets better when they get older.
No, I used to be kind of smart.
Yeah.
Now I'm not.
No. Well, memory and intelligence, that's two different things anyway. I mean, I think we all tend to get smarter in a sense as we get older and experience, learn new things and all that. But the memory just starts to, it's amazing to me. I mean, I can remember song lyrics from a song I haven't heard since 7th grade. I remember the whole song, but I can't remember a conversation I had yesterday.
Yeah.
Like Bethany would be like, I just told you about this yesterday. We were going to this people's house, and I'm like, I don't remember any of this.
That's different when it's with your wife. We have an uncanny way of tuning out our wives sometimes, unfortunately. And you just nod your head.
Selective hearing.
Selective. There's a bunch of memes online about it too. It's not just us. But,
Yeah. Which is bad. I mean, that's a bad thing. We need to not do that.
Yes, I agree.
It's not good for a healthy marriage to tune our wives out with it.
I agree.
Especially if they're talking about something, you know, important.
And when you find yourself doing it, then make up for it in some special way. Right?
Yes. Flowers.
Yes.
Right? That's what flowers are for, man.
Yes.
There you go.
Took my wife out to breakfast this morning.
Oh, yeah? Where'd you guys go?
We went to, what's that little spot over by Shaw's?
Oh, the pantry.
Pantry.
Yeah.
For the first time.
Oh, I've never been there.
No.
Did you used to go when it was Perco's back in the day?
Maybe once.
Okay.
But it was legit. It was good.
Oh, yeah. That's a great little diner.
We usually go to good old K's or
Right.
Jack's. And
Can't
like,
go wrong with
where
K's,
else is there? So we tried that. And it was good.
Nice. Yeah.
Good.
I like that. It's like that place, like pantry reminds me of like Pappy's.
Yeah.
Like you go in there and like some of the waitresses they're kind of rude and you can tell they're stressed out. You know, the tables are kind of dirty. You know, it's like all.
Yeah.
But that's like sometimes that makes it. You know, and then the food's good. You know, so it's like, oh, this is cool. You know,
Every once in a while, I'll go out to Pappy's too, but I don't like it because you leave there smelling like Pappy's for the rest of the day unless you change all your clothes or take a shower. It's in your hair. It's in my beard.
Right.
and unfortunately, the pantry was similar.
Okay.
They don't have enough ventilation in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
But overall,
what'd you get, dude? What'd you order?
I like the what is it, like the griddle or something? It has the eggs and the potatoes.
Oh, like all mixed, like a skillet. That's all mixed together. Yeah. Okay.
I like the skillet.
Yeah.
Skillet, man, and they had a variety, so
nice.
I'll be back.
Nice, dude. Yeah, I like that too. I like that depending on whether or not they have the good home fries or good hash browns. Because some places have terrible hash browns or really good home fries, or vice versa. So if they have good home fries, I'm going with the skillet because that's usually what they use.
There
on
you go.
You know, so
yeah, I'm a home fries guy.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. What about your wife? What'd she get?
She decided to split with me today.
Oh, okay.
And they said, "What do you want on the side?" And we got a couple pancakes on the side, so we just split one meal.
That's what I love about breakfast places. You can get a side of pancakes.
Yeah, we don't need
That's
two
a full
full
meal.
meals.
Yeah. A side of pancakes.
Roll out of here. That worked great.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So how was church today, though? Did you go to? No church today.
Actually, I kicked the pastor off the stage and
nice, dude.
Yeah,
Good.
I talked about Paul.
Hopefully hopefully somebody recorded that because I would like to see that on YouTube or something. You know.
Well, that's why you do your podcast.
Yeah. Oh man.
Come here, lay it all out.
Yeah.
No repercussions, no hearing from the congregation.
That's true. That's true. You don't have to worry about getting kicked out or anything, you know? Yeah.
And whether people listen or not or whatever. I mean, it's nice that there's a recording.
Yes.
It's historical.
It is.
If I want to refer it to someone.
Yeah. It's posterity.
Check it out.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I kind of like about it too. I mean, for me, if I go back, I mean, I'm doing it for a little over 2 years now, but I look back at all the episodes and you can listen to me back in the beginning. I'm saying different things than I am now in certain aspects, which is kind of cool. Like you see the progression, you know, which is kind of cool.
That's really cool
for my own posterity, because obviously I'm on every episode.
Yeah.
So, I mean, for guests, maybe not so much because you're only on one or two, or for you too, I guess. Here.
Well, yeah. Sometimes I'll be talking to someone and they say, "Hey, what are you into? Give me a brief synopsis of what you're into."
Brief.
Like, bro, what, we got 4 minutes?
Yeah.
And now I can say, actually, just check out this. Here, let me send you a link.
Yeah.
You know,
You could be brief. You could just be like, Yahweh's the father of lies. Paul invented the idea of animal sacrifice and aliens or whatever, right? Or whatever we're gonna get to today with the orbs,
we're not going to be able to get to aliens yet.
No aliens? Oh, dude.
I don't think we're going to have time. That's going to be for the next one.
We got to, man.
But this stuff needs to come before aliens. Because the way people study UFOs and aliens right now is kind of separated from everything. It's just like there's off-world vehicles with creatures in them, and what? Yeah. There needs to be some kind of foundation of underlining reality as to what that could possibly be.
Sure.
And the stuff that I'm covering today is that underlying reality.
Okay.
So when we get there, it's not just your typical UFO discussion. It's, oh, I see.
Right.
I see what these are from the beginning.
Okay.
So when we see them, you're not surprised that they're there.
I thought of you with someone showed me some. I'm sure you've seen his videos. And that's what I thought of you. But of the fires in LA.
Yeah.
And there's somebody showing these different videos where it shows like this streak of something flying through the sky right during the fires. Did you see this?
I've seen so much stuff like
and they're
that.
trying to say that was the arson, or that's how whoever's starting the fires, that's how they're doing it, or
Yeah, well, it's not just that. Have you heard of or followed at all the stuff in New Jersey?
New Jersey? No. I haven't followed hardly any of it. So
wow. Well, all over the world, particularly in New Jersey, there's what they're calling drones. Just dozens and dozens of unidentified drones.
Oh, I remember this. This has been going on for months with the drones. Yeah, I remember the drones, Nobody can explain where they came from.
Nobody can explain where they came from or where they're going. And they've spent billions of dollars on anti-drone technology, and they can't figure this one out.
Meaning to get rid of them?
Yeah, to find out about them, get rid of them.
Okay.
And their answers are just BS.
What do you think they are? What do you think they are?
I actually haven't. I was waiting for more information because right now it's just kind of all confusion. Still is. But
because my first thought is always government. I always think it's got to be something government, and they're just obviously they're going to lie about it.
They're just lying about it.
Yeah, because if they're trying to do something that they're trying to hide from us, then they're not going to tell us the truth anyway. But I mean, if you're trying to be incognito, I don't see how flying a bunch of drones up in the sky is really going to do that either. It's pretty stupid.
Yeah, well, they're seeing these crafts that nobody's ever seen before, but they look. Some of them look off-world. Some of them look man-made, but we've never seen them before. Some of them are drones. Some of them are helicopters.
Oh, there's a mix of things up there altogether?
Oh, yeah. It's
weird.
All a huge mixture.
Huh.
So...
That's goofy, man.
It's really weird.
Okay.
So I'm just waiting for more information, but the government's not helping. They say, we don't know what they are, but we know that they're not from other countries, and we know they mean us no harm.
Like, how can you know that?
If you don't know what they are, then how do you know they're not from other countries? Yeah. How do you know they mean us no harm?
Right. You ever see Mars Attacks, that Tim Burton movie from back in the 90s?
No.
Oh, that's the whole thing. They come and they're like, oh, peace, and they're like, oh, whatever. And as soon as the president or whoever's like, oh, let's just shake hand, they pull out their little laser beams and start killing everybody. It's like, how do you know? Like, oh, they don't mean us any harm because they've been up there and they haven't done anything. Therefore, it's like, for all you know, they're setting something up for some massive thing they're going to do all at once. Like they're up there congregating and setting up.
Yeah.
Idiotic.
We'll have to talk more about this next time.
Yeah. All right. Let's bust into where you're at, man. I don't remember where we left off last time. So.
last time at about the 4-hour mark.
Yes.
I was losing.
I remember that. Yeah.
My focus and my voice, but
Yep.
yeah, we were talking about the double slit experiment, and
right, which is the photons, right?
Yeah, but it's still up for debate. I kind of wanted to rehash a few things about Paul, and Martin Luther.
Let's do it.
And James.
Okay, I think we talked about James.
Huh?
I don't think we talked about James last time. Did we?
No. But at the same time, I kind of want to get to the other stuff. And did you say you had some questions about last time?
I got some notes. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, some stuff.
Maybe as I go through it, those.
Yeah, if anything comes up,
because there's a lot of similarities from what I talked about last time with Paul.
Okay.
And I'm gonna try to bust through this in like 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah, go for it, man.
So if somebody's listening and they don't want to hear about Paul, the Apostle Paul and James and the Reformation, they can jump ahead 20 or 30 minutes and get to the good stuff.
Yeah.
But
it's all good stuff on this podcast. There's no bad stuff on this podcast.
Absolutely.
It's nothing but gold.
Yeah, the heart of what I want to cover is a lot of items within the mystic and spiritual and esoteric traditions, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, astral projection.
Yeah.
You ever heard of that?
Yeah. In fact, I just did an episode, last one I had come out, the guy was talking about near-death experiences. Or NDEs, as they call them.
Absolutely.
They're in the know.
Absolutely.
If you know the slang
Okay,
terms,
I'm going to listen to that one.
All right.
Psi phenomenon, ESP, psionics, mediums, channelers, remote viewing, precognition, clairvoyance, reincarnation. Did he talk about some of this stuff?
He did talk about reincarnation.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's his name?
Brian Moles.
Okay, Brian.
Yeah, he's got his own podcast called Warriors of Light 111.
Nice.
Yeah, and he's all into he probably lines up more than with the stuff you believe than with me.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to listen to him and his podcast.
Yes.
Yeah, if you want to start diving into stuff like this, this is kind of where things are going in the just the esoteric range, and it's kind of trending right now in that direction.
It is, yeah, and I've seen that myself.
Well, yeah, the church is dwindling, and this is growing.
Right.
So, just throwing that out there.
No, that doesn't mean it's right. But you're probably right. It's probably more appealing in a lot of ways to a lot of people.
Yeah.
With a lot of the deconstruction going on anyway within a lot of that. Kind of the religious world.
Yeah. We talked a little bit about including all of the books from the early Christian era, first century.
Yeah, canonization and all that
stuff.
Yeah,
the canonization. And why didn't we include all the books? There's 52 books in the Nag Hammadi scriptures alone, and a bunch of books in the Dead Sea Scrolls that aren't in there.
Right.
And so,
and the word you were using was chaos.
Oh,
when we
absolutely.
talk about the canonization of Scripture, you said it was chaos.
It was chaotic.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to address a couple of the. My statement was, if there's contradictions in the Bible, then why don't we just put them all in?
Right. Yeah, I remember you saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, because some of these 52 scriptures themselves, they have some contradictions, and that's probably one of the reasons they kept them out. Well, it is.
But that's the if, though, and we didn't really talk about it. I think I asked you for some contradiction. We didn't really get into that.
Yeah, so I wanted to address a couple.
Okay.
Long pause.
Yeah. That's the beauty of it not being live.
Nice. Well, shoot, I'm used to having 2 big screens.
Oh yeah, and you're set up at home.
Yeah, when I'm set at home.
Yeah,
2 or 3.
You're quite techie, huh?
Well, so the one that I like to read through is the resurrection stories.
Okay.
And the difference between Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Mm-hmm.
And we spell that out, we can see some contradictions and get a better idea of what they thought about the gospel. What is the gospel? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of want to read through the quick paragraphs of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and just compare it.
Hit it.
Mark was written first.
Yep.
So he has Markian authority.
Yeah.
It was written around 70 AD. So for the resurrection, it says, when the Sabbath was passed, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome bought spices so they might go and anoint him. And very early on the first day of the week, when the sun had risen, they went to the tomb. They were saying to one another, who will roll away the stone for us to enter the tomb? And looking up, they saw that the stone had been rolled away. It was very large, and entering the tomb, they saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed in a white robe, and they were alarmed. He said to them, don't be alarmed. You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He is risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him? But go, tell the disciples and Peter that he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him, just as he told you. And they went out, fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment they had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. And that is the original ending of the book of Mark.
Yeah.
Before those extra 9 verses they added.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
So that's the resurrection account of Mark. And then Matthew, chapter 28. Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. For fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, do not be afraid, for I know you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, he is risen, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell the disciples that he is risen from the dead, and behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you. So they departed quickly from the tomb. They were with great fear and joy, and ran and told the disciples. And behold, Jesus met them and said, greetings. And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. There they will see me. And then Luke, chapter 24. The first day of the week at early dawn, they went to the tomb, taking spices they had already prepared, and they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they went in, they did not find the body of the Lord. While they were perplexed about this, behold, 2 men stood by them in dazzling apparel. And as they were frightened, bowed their faces to the ground. The men said to them, why do you seek the living among the dead? He's not here, he's risen. Remember how they told you, while he was still in Galilee, that the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified on the 3rd day and rise. And then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all these things to the 11 and to the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the mother of James, and the other women with them, who told these things to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter rose and ran to the tomb, stooping, and looking in, he saw the linen clothes by themselves, and he went home marveling at what had happened. Then the road to Emmaus, Jesus runs into 2 of the apostles. And then Jesus appears to the disciples. And then in John, the last one, chapter 20, now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early, while it was still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and to the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them,
I love that. The one whom Jesus loved. That always cracks me up.
Yep.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they laid him. So Peter went out with the other disciple, and they were going toward the tomb. Both of them were running together, but the disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. And stooping to look in, he saw the linen clothes lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went in the tomb. He saw the linen clothes lying there, face cloth, which had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen clothes, but folded up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went in, and he saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise again from the dead. Then the disciples went back to their homes. Then Jesus appears to Mary Magdalene, and Jesus appears to the disciples, to Thomas. So in those stories alone.
Mm-hmm. So what's the contradictions there for you between those four?
Well, who went to the tomb? You know, Matthew says Mary and the other Mary. Mark says Mary and Salome. Luke says Mary, Joanna, and Mary.
Yeah. So
John says only Mary. So those aren't contradictions. They're
not. Yeah,
they're
I was going to say that it could very well be that they all went.
Yeah.
Just one account says two. Again, like I said last time, if I was talking to you and James or somebody out in the parking lot, and I came in and I told my wife, I was just talking to Ryan.
Yeah, so that
doesn't mean James wasn't there.
That's more of an exclusion than a contradiction.
Yeah.
When did they go to the tomb? Mark said at daytime after the sun rose. John says nighttime before the sun rose. Mm-hmm. That's a small contradiction, but we get the point. It was at dawn.
Yeah.
What did the women see? In Matthew, an angel rolled away the stone and sat on it. In Mark, the young man sitting on the side of the tomb. In Luke, 2 men in shining garments. And John, Mary saw nothing but a moved stone.
Well, we don't know that they saw nothing. Again, it doesn't
it
say they saw
omission.
nothing.
Yep. What was said, Jesus has risen, and Jesus is going to Galilee. Mark, the young man, says, Jesus is risen, Jesus is going to Galilee. Meet him there.
No.
2 men, or in Luke, 2 men say, Jesus is risen. No mention of Galilee, no mention of Galilee in John. So, omissions.
Mm-hmm.
Did Jesus appear to the women? And he appeared to Mary and Matthew. Only Mary and Mark.
Well, but you're adding the word only. Do you see what I'm saying? If the word only was there, that would be a contradiction. Because if one says he appeared to Mary and Mary, and then he appeared only to Mary, then that would exclude the other one.
It's the same thing. It's an omission. Only Mary Magdalene was mentioned.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because again, with the 2 angels of the tomb, if it said there was only one angel in one, and the other one said there was 2, that would be an absolute contradiction.
Yep. And it's the same omission with which disciples went to the tomb, because in Luke it's only Peter.
Right.
And in John it's Peter and John.
Yeah.
Did the disciples believe the reports of the women? In Matthew they believed the women and quickly went to Galilee. In Mark they did not believe. Mm-hmm. So that's a contradiction. In Luke they did not believe, and they did not believe and go to Galilee.
Yeah. I'm sure you've heard the rebuttals to this stuff before. I'm sure because I know you've studied all this. But I mean, I'm by no means a scholar apologist or anything. But I mean, to say that that it's very possible that they didn't believe at first, and then decided after that she was telling the truth. Maybe at first because of the time they were like, oh, what does this woman know, right? Because obviously they didn't have a high view of women at the time, or what they had to say. So, but then they thought about it. I was like, oh, maybe we better go check that out. It's a possibility. Yeah. So, I mean, to me, a flat out contradiction has to be something like, there's no possibility. Like, it'd have to be one account says, I don't know, the stone was already rolled away, and one that the disciples pushed the stone away on their own, and then another one says that an angel pushed it away. That would be a contradiction, because you have 2 things that are mutually exclusive from each other.
Yeah, and I think these next couple are that.
Okay.
That's where I'm kind of going to.
Okay. In the same 4 sections?
Yeah.
Okay.
How many disciples did Jesus appear to first? In Matthew, it was all of them.
Mm-hmm.
In Mark, it was distinctly 2 of them.
Okay.
First. Luke, it was 2 of them. And in John, it was 10 of them. Because Thomas wasn't present. And in Corinthians, the story told there, it was 1 of them. It was just Peter. So that, I think, would be considered a contradiction because the word first is used. And was it all of them, or 2 of them, or 10 of them, or 1 of them?
Right.
So there's probably just confusion by whoever's writing the story.
But I mean, two could be in 2 or 1 could be involved in all. Do you see what I'm saying? Like the road to Emmaus was just 2 guys. Right. And does it say that there that was first? Like so the point you're making, I guess, is that they were first ones revealed it to. Like here's the order. These guys saw Jesus first, and then these guys, and then these guys, or then all of them.
Yeah, if you read them all and line them all up, which I don't want to get into the nitty gritty, but because anybody could do that, but they're using the word first.
Yeah.
And this is the one that I think is the most credible, is that where were the disciples told to go? Because in Matthew and Mark, they're told to go to Galilee. Jesus will be waiting for you in Galilee. Go to Galilee.
Right.
It's very clear cut. And in Luke, it says they were commanded to stay in Jerusalem. And in Acts, this says they were commanded to stay in Jerusalem. So that is the first thing.
Okay.
Where do we go? The one definitely said go to Galilee. The other one definitely said stay in Jerusalem. So I think that can't be reconciled. I mean, you can put all this stuff in a timeline, but when you get to what did they do first, you're in a pickle because one account says stay in Jerusalem. Yeah. The other one says go straight to Galilee.
So are both all the accounts talking to about the same people?
Yes.
Okay.
What the disciples are to do immediately.
All the disciples or certain disciples?
The disciples, yeah,
all
the
of
disciples.
Them. So in one it tells all of them to stay in Jerusalem,
yep.
and the other one tells all of them to go to Galilee.
Yep.
Okay.
So I think that can't be reconciled. Where did Jesus ascend into heaven? In Mark, it was Galilee. In Luke, it was Bethany, and in Acts, it was the Mount of Olivet. So it wasn't just the contradictions that I wanted to point out.
Before we move on, though, I'm just curious. Have you? Because again, I'm probably not the best. I haven't researched all of that kind of stuff. I mean, I've done a little bit here and there, but what I've learned is that when you listen to guys who have. So I guess that's what I'm asking you. Have you ever? I'm sure you have listened to some of the guys that do make it their life's work, for lack of a better word, to look into that kind of stuff. Kind of like what you're doing, but they're coming to another conclusion, or maybe they won't say that's how'd you just word it? That's not
omissions.
No, you're saying that's not. You can't. There's no other way around it. Basically, what you were saying, like this is a definite contradiction. But if you read up or you watch a podcast or you listen to somebody who's saying, well, no, here's the reason why this is not a contradiction, and they have their reasons for that. Do you listen to that and go, they're just trying to make stuff up because they're Christians and they want this to be true, therefore they have to scramble? Or do you ever take any credibility from what they're saying, or do you think it's always bogus?
Well, no, I listen and I read their words and try to find the meaning in it, but it turns out, like what you said, it falls flat. Yeah, because you already know what they're trying to do. They're Christians trying to put a square peg in a round hole, and so they have this timeline, and they can't justify it. They just throw them all in there, and then they don't know what order to put the first 2 in, for example, and they can't justify it. But what really strikes me is what is said at the end of these resurrection stories. Like, Jesus appears to them after the resurrection, and he says stuff like, repentance for the forgiveness of sins will be preached in his name to all the nations. Repentance is a call to action and change via works and deeds. And in John it says, but these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have abundant life in his name. It seems like after the resurrection, it should have all been out that if Paul's message was correct, it should have all been out that the message that Jesus died on the cross for our sins. But there's no mention of that even after the resurrection. I mean, he talks about repentance. He tells the disciples, go, and if you forgive them, or if they forgive you, you forgive them of their sins.
Are you talking about Paul's writings now? You're saying Paul never wrote about the repentance? I mean, he never wrote about Jesus's...
Well, I'm just talking about how Paul's message that Jesus died on the cross for our sins.
Yeah.
He's basically saying that wasn't preached in the times of Jesus because he hadn't died yet. And I'm saying even after he died and rose from the dead, in the Gospels, that still isn't stated.
Doesn't Jesus say of himself at some point, I came to lay down my life as a ransom for many? That was before the crucifixion and the resurrection, right?
Yeah, but taken into context, that, well, even the Old Testament a number of times says a man cannot give up his life for the ransom of many. It says it in 4 places in the Old Testament. A man cannot die for the sins of someone else.
Well, but he's not just a man if Christianity's true.
Right.
He's also deity. He's all God, all man, right? That's the Christian belief.
But he's born of woman.
Sure.
He's a man.
Yeah, he's all man. I'm not denying his humanity at all. I'm just saying he's not like you and me, is my point. His human side maybe is, but he has the other side that we don't. Yeah. I don't think we have.
But I think taken in context, even we have been taught to read verses like John 3:16 and equate it to Paul's message, where without the shedding of blood there can be no remission of sins. But if you read it by itself and take it in the context of all of Jesus's words, he's just talking about how to live an abundant life.
So you would say, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever should believe in him shall not perish, have everlasting life. You would take that to mean he gave his Son to come and teach us the right way to live.
The right way to live. He's a way shower. He
not
showed
gave
us
as
the
a sacrifice.
way.
Yeah. Well, I would agree with you. I think on John 3:16, that's probably not referring to necessarily to that aspect of it.
Yeah.
Because Jesus did come and teach us how to live. He did.
Yes.
Right? Yes, that's true.
And so in that way, he did lay down his life.
Meaning he gave up his time to spend time with us
no,
to
he knew he
teach
was
us?
going to die
Okay.
for his message. And so he laid down his life
Okay.
for his message.
But it wasn't for the remission of sins. It was just...
Well, his message is about the remission of sins.
Okay.
His message is dealing with sin. So he did lay down his life for the remission of sins.
Well, then what gives us the remissions of sins in your view then? Just living out the good things Jesus told us to do?
Living out Jesus' message.
Which is
love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself.
Okay.
That was his commandment that he says, upon which all the laws and the prophets hang.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite verse from Jesus.
Okay.
That was his message. And if you live this message, you will have abundant life. Like John 10:10, Jesus said, I have come. He's saying why he's come. I have come that they might have life and they might have life more abundantly.
And you see that as human life, not spiritual. I mean, I shouldn't say not spiritual. That's not what you're saying.
Not a heaven and hell thing.
Right, yes. Not an eternal life per se, but more of a, while you're on the earth, live abundantly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we're here, let's live it abundantly. So,
yeah.
And he talks about eternal life here and there, but then I mentioned this last time, but he explains what eternal life is. Now this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus whom they've sent. So I don't think Paul's gospel equates with Jesus' gospel.
Right. But what do you think that word know means right there? Do you think that just means like knowing them, like I know you, Like, you're here, I know who you are, we're hanging out and talking, or do you think it's deeper than that?
The word know in that scripture I just read,
Yeah.
that they might know you,
Yeah.
the Father,
Right.
the only true God, whom you have sent. It's based on Jesus' message of what a true Father looks like, in contradiction to Yahweh. Getting back into my last message,
Right.
But yeah, my point about the contradictions is include all the books, and it would clarify so much about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
We can quibble with the Bible all day long,
Right.
but that's just one piece of the thousands of pieces that should be on the table. And they'll explain a lot better than the one book alone, filled with 27 books in the New Testament, as opposed to the 52 other ones thrown out.
And you don't see a problem with the contradictions within those other books because you see them in this book anyway.
Exactly.
You see them within the 27 books we have canonized, so therefore all the other ones should be in there as well.
Yeah, we're big kids. We can read.
Well, and I think that when you get in discussion, I'm sure you've had this before, but like if you and I are in discussion and I'll say I believe that what we have canonized is inspired scripture and the rest is not, and I have my reasons for believing that, and you believe not that, you believe that they're all just as inspired as any and they should all be included. You and I getting in discussion about things like a sacrifice of Jesus and all that kind of stuff is going to be kind of hard to communicate with, because you're going to say, well, Ryan, why do you believe that? And I'm going to say, well, because, John chapter 7 verse whatever says this. And you might say, well, that's part doesn't, or because I know we talked last time and you said not all, you don't think all of it is accurate. You think there's some of it in it that's not true, right? Right. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think you said that.
Correct.
So you might just say that about the verse I'm quoting. I say, well, here's why I believe that, Ryan. You say, well, that verse is bogus. That's not true. And then where do we go from there? You can't really go anywhere from there because, unless you can show me why that verse is not true.
Well, that's where we really need to use reason and logic and pull everything together and come to conclusions without faith. Because the only way to assume every word in any of these scriptures are true is either by faith or comparing and using reason and logic. Because there's no way that we can verify that every passage in the Bible is true. That's where the faith comes in.
In a sense, yeah, I could see that. But I think when I look into like some of the apologist work and some of the even how they canonize scripture and all that kind of stuff, I think there's logic involved. There's reasons that they choose what they choose and they do what they do, right? Even today you talk about, I was going to ask you if you've heard of this guy that everybody's talking about now. It's Wesley Huff. Have you heard of this guy?
No.
Okay, so he's pretty popular right now. He's been all over the thing. You've heard of Billy Carson, though, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so the kind of viral video that's been going around lately is a, I say debate, but it's very civil. But this guy, Wesley Huff, and there's no saying, Billy Carson are having a discussion about exactly what we're talking about. And Billy Carson is saying, well, here's why the canonization was this and that. And Wesley Huff will explain why he disagrees with that. And he's pretty knowledgeable on that, kind of like you are on the other side. So I would be curious to know what your kind of rebuttals
So
to
Wesley
that
Huff is representing which side now?
He would say that the books that we have are canonized the way they are divinely, and that's why we have the 27 books of the Old Testament and the book of the New Testament and the books of the Old Testament.
Well, Billy Carson is interesting. It's very fascinating, flamboyant guy, but I personally don't trust him.
Okay.
So
yeah,
I don't know, I'll check it out though.
Yeah, I'll send you the exact link when we're done. But yeah,
okay.
I think you'd.
I wrote his name down in my notes here.
Okay. Yeah, he's all over the place. He's popping up everywhere.
But yeah, the Catholic Church was basically played our daddy because we were too stupid back in the day to know anything for ourselves. They had to force feed us. Most people were illiterate, so I understand. But times have changed.
But that's why the Reformation happened, right?
The Reformation happened, and they tried to fix some of the abuses of the Catholic Church, but they actually doubled down on Paul's teachings.
Right.
And
well, that's because they think they're inspired. That's why. right?
Yeah.
The Protestants that came out of Catholicism,
Yeah.
they hold to all those books as being true.
Yeah, well, they doubled down on Paul's teachings, which to me takes away from Jesus' teachings. And like the 7 books they did remove from the Bible, they also tried to remove James and Revelation.
Hebrews, I think, was one of them on the block for a while.
Yeah,
Right,
Hebrews was on the block. So when you say, they wanted to keep Paul's teachings because they thought the Bible was inspired, then why do they want to remove James and Revelation?
Mm-hmm.
And
because that was that's when they were deciding what to canonize for the New Testament, right? Is what you're talking about?
This is during the Reformation. This is in
Okay.
the 1500s.
Mm-hmm.
So the ship has sailed in
When
canonization.
this is when they separated and didn't hold to the Apocrypha. That's at that time where they were talking about James and Hebrews being excluded.
Yes.
Okay.
But it wasn't the Apocrypha, it was Scripture.
Okay.
And they removed it and made it Apocrypha
Right.
in the 1500s.
But we're talking about the same group of books.
Yeah. So James, the author of James, is James the Just, the brother of Jesus, and the most highly esteemed figure of his day, even among the disciples.
Yeah.
So that's why he became the bishop of the Church of Jerusalem, the epicenter of Christianity and Judaism.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Martin Luther said the book of James is straw not worthy to be burned in my oven as tinder.
Yes. Do you know why?
Because
he couldn't reconcile. Well, he couldn't reconcile James 2, where it says faith without works is dead, and then Paul saying it's by faith, not by works.
That's what I'm getting into.
But that's not a contradiction.
Well, let me keep going.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, because I definitely want to talk about that one, because I love that one.
Yeah, Luther said, many sweat hard at reconciling James with Paul, but unsuccessfully. So he admits that to himself, he admits they contradict each other. And sole fide, right? You familiar with sole fide? It means faith alone.
Okay.
And it was the central tenet of Martin Luther in the Reformation, along with Paul.
Yeah.
However, the only time faith alone is written in the Bible is in James, where it says a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone.
Yes and no. I don't think that's what James is getting at. And there's a reason why. There's a reason why. And I just let me know when you want me to talk about that, and I will. I don't want to cut you off again, but...
Okay. So Paul says a man is not justified by works of the law, but through faith in Jesus. And James says faith without works is dead.
Correct.
Paul says I was once alive apart from the law, but when the law came in, sin came alive and I died.
Yep.
James says when lust has conceived, it brings forth sin. And sin, when it finished, brings forth death, not the commandments, which coincides with Jesus, who says evil things come from within and they defile the person, not the law. Paul says, for what does Scripture say? Abraham believed God and it was counted to him as righteousness. James says Abraham was considered righteous by what he did, his actions. James says religion that our God the Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted in the world. Which again aligns with Jesus.
Yeah.
In Matthew 25, come, you are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you. For I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. A stranger, you welcomed me. I was naked, you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you visited. Because as you did it to one of the least of these, you did it to me.
Yeah.
Through works and deeds and commandments.
So all that stuff you're talking about right there, you fed me when I was hungry, you gave me clothes when I had no clothes, all that.
Yep.
That's the works that James is talking about. Mm-hmm. And the reason why it's important is here's... All right, sorry, maybe you're still going. I keep butting in to go into the James thing, but I don't want to cut you off. But it does need to be talked about because it's actually pretty fascinating. Because he's not saying that works, like you have to do works in order to show that you have faith. That's not what he's saying. He's saying faith without works is dead. Because faith itself will have works as a byproduct. It will be there. If you have faith, you are going to be feeding people that need food. You are going to be giving water. Because faith, when you break it down, and I'm sure, I don't know if you've done this, I guess I shouldn't say I'm sure, but you've probably gone down this road too, where you look up what faith means, like in Greek. Like you look up the Greek word for faith, it means persuasion, right? It's not something that we like come up with. And it's like, well, you just have to have more faith, Ryan. Just muster up some more faith. All right, how am I going to get some more? What do I do? Like, it's not like that, because Jesus said he's the author and finisher of the faith. Galatians 5 says faith is a fruit of God's Spirit. We don't produce faith. God produces faith. So, and what comes with that is works, which was the whole point that James is making. He's saying, you show me your faith without works, and I'll show you my faith by my works. He's not saying, I'm going to go out in my human and do a bunch of works to prove to you I have faith. Am I making sense?
No,
because
it makes
the point is, like,
sense.
the works will come with the faith.
You are summarizing James very well.
Right, but that's the
but not Paul.
Well, yes, because Paul says you're justified by faith, not by works.
Right.
Okay? You're not justified by works. You're still justified by faith. But you're justified by faith. That faith will have works with it. It's impossible for it not. You will bear fruit, God said. You not Jesus, now you're saved. Jesus go and try to bear fruit.
Differ.
How so?
Well, Paul goes on to say, we know that a person is made right by faith in Jesus, not by obeying the law. And we have believed in Jesus so that we might be made right with God because of our faith in Christ, not because we have obeyed the law. For no one will ever be made right with God by obeying the law.
I'm not saying works in James 2 is the law. I'm not saying it's the law. That's not what James is talking about. He's not saying faith without following the law is dead. Well, the Greek word for works there means activity, action, not following the law.
In many ways, they're synonymous. Jesus said, if you want to enter into eternal life, keep the commandments. The commandments, the law, faith, are not faith, but commandments, law, works, deeds are synonymous and interchangeable in a lot of these. So if you want to enter eternal life, keep the commandments. Mm-hmm. Paul, if you confess your mouth, Jesus is Lord, you'll be saved. Or Jesus says, many will say to me with their mouth, Lord, Lord, and then I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness.
Yes.
Those who do not practice the law or deeds or commandments. So it's not just, as Paul says, just confess them with your mouth.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say that like the law is not a work. What I'm saying is work. The word works doesn't always mean the Mosaic law. Because you don't see anywhere where, as far as I know, maybe you can correct me on this, but I haven't seen anywhere in Scripture where they say, in order to have eternal life, follow the law. Or I mean, all those verses you were just now reading, it's not saying that, right?
Right. Let me keep going. Paul says, for Christ is the end of the law, for righteousness to anyone who believes. Nope. Jesus said, do not think I came to end the law.
Yeah.
Contradiction. Or the prophets. I did not come to end, but to fulfill it.
Boom. There's the end of your contradiction as soon as he says that. Like
a worker fulfilling his duties, he doesn't find a way out of it to end it.
No, he literally is the fulfillment. If you receive him and he's living in you, you have the fulfillment of the law. It doesn't mean the law is gone. He talks about in Romans how the whole idea of the law is a mirror. It's to show us that we can't do it. It's like giving you all these rules. Say, here, follow these to be saved. And they say, we can't. Exactly. So why can't you? Oh, because you need a savior? Okay. Right? Like that's the whole point. It's not saying that you have to do the law in order to be saved. And Jesus was the fulfillment of the law, which means he didn't abolish it. He didn't say the law does nothing. The law is pointless. Throw out your Old Testaments because who cares? He just says, I am it. And I think it's Galatians where it talks about the tutor, right? That the law is to be a schoolmaster until faith arrives. And that's the switch up. That's the new covenant.
Mm-hmm. Well, he said it did not come to end it.
Right. But to fulfill it.
Yeah, to do it, to practice it.
That's not what he said.
Yeah.
He didn't say do it and practice it.
He says
fulfill it.
Which means to practice it.
No.
Okay. Taken in context, I think that's what he meant. Historically, the Pauline epistles were all written before the Gospels. Mm-hmm. So I don't know how much access Paul had to Jesus' teachings.
Would you say that what you just said is believed by everyone? That the Paul?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
The epistles were
There's
Definitely
nobody that puts the Gospels as
nobody
written before that.
Nobody,
Okay.
Christian or non-Christian.
Gotcha.
But people will say, yeah, he had access to the rough draft, basically. Mm-hmm. But my question is, why does he never quote Jesus?
Paul never quotes Jesus?
No.
Not one time does he quote Jesus? Really?
Maybe once.
Okay. I would have to look into that. I've never thought about that.
But that's my whole point. It's like he has his own gospel, and I agree with Martin Luther to where you cannot make right Paul's message versus James and Jesus's message. I agree with Martin Luther there. And maybe it's because he only had the rough draft or the traditions that were floating around of what Jesus may have said. Because I think if he had the four Gospels that we do, I don't think he would have said what he would have said.
Because you think he's contradicting stuff.
He is. Yeah. I think he's blatantly contradicting.
Okay.
But his buddy Luke, who traveled with him, wrote the book of Luke. So he had some inside knowledge of the rough draft.
Sure.
But reading Paul and seeing his message, it seems like since he didn't quote Jesus ever, it seems like he doesn't care what Jesus said. Mm-hmm. It seems like...
But he talks about Jesus a lot.
Oh, yeah.
But you think he's not quoting Jesus because he doesn't agree with Jesus and he's making his own gospel, like you said.
He thinks that Jesus...
That includes Jesus and his name.
Yes.
And all the other stuff. But you think he doesn't hold him in high enough regard to actually quote his words?
He doesn't care about his words because he agrees with you that Jesus fulfilled it, ended it. And it seems like he sees Jesus as a body given by Yahweh to be sacrificed for sins. I think that's Paul's gospel. And I think it contradicts Jesus's message. When a lawyer asked Jesus, "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment of the law?" And he said to them, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets." Like I was mentioning earlier, I think that's my favorite verse right there. It relates more to the spirit of the law.
Yeah.
Or loving heart being the source of the good deeds, like you said.
Right.
I think we agree on that.
Did you know, though, that those are both in the Old Testament that he's quoting from and the New Testament where he says that they're future indicatives?
No, I didn't.
Meaning he's talking about a future event, and an indicative mood in Greek means a statement of fact. So he's saying you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and you will love your neighbor yourself. It's not a challenge. Mm-hmm. He's not saying what's the best commandment. Go do those. You better go out there and start doing those. It's more like, no, if you have God who is agape, literally is agape dwelling inside of you, you will be agapeing because he is doing it through you. That's why 1 John says it's impossible. I'm not going to quote this exactly right, but it's impossible for you, if you say you're a believer, yet you hate your brother, you're lying. Because it's impossible to be saved and to hate your brother. And it doesn't mean like you don't get mad at a brother or get upset with somebody. It means like to literally hate them in your heart. You can't. If you're saved, you can't.
Well,
it's impossible.
This is why Jesus railed on the Pharisees so much. He called them whitewashed tombs. They're pretty on the outside.
Correct.
But they're a corpse in the
middle. They were religious.
Yes.
They were doing all the religious things, but their hearts were far from God. Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
They wouldn't hesitate to screw people over, like in the marketplace, selling their sacrifice animals to poor people for too much money, just raking them over the coals.
But that's exactly why Jesus was always at odds with them, is because he came with the truth, and they had built up all these years of religiousness around the idea and concept of God, and then the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the whole thing. But they messed it all up. Their heart was not right. They thought it was all a bunch of rules to follow that made you righteous and better than everyone else.
Yeah,
which is why Peter was called out when he was not eating with the Gentiles, right? Because I'm Peter, And of course he knew that was wrong. He should be eating with them.
I think it was a confusing time, and
maybe
it was.
And I'm sure
very confusing time, and they're like, well, what do we do now? After the resurrection, what do we do? Where do we go? What do we believe? What do we do with the law? Because Jesus was, no matter who you are, Jesus was enigmatic in his statements.
Yes.
It's not easy to parse out.
Right.
So I wish he would have been more clear cut. But
That's true. Especially like in the Gospels where he's saying certain things. And that's why I think there's so many denominations and so many doctrines.
Absolutely.
Because they say, well, we think Jesus meant this.
Yep.
And someone else says, no, I think Jesus meant this. And I'm like, well, Jesus didn't say either one of those. What did he say? Well, this is all he said, so we don't know what he meant. Then leave it at that. Well, maybe it's not up to you to figure out what he meant.
This is what I was saying last time. This is where we need to bring everything in. Because I think it helps clear stuff up.
Okay, so give me an example of that. Like, give me an example of one of the extra biblical books, as I would call it, that would give more clarity to like something maybe Jesus said or in the Gospels that he didn't explain in depth to where maybe one of these other books gives that.
I gave you a few last time.
Oh, I don't remember. See, my memory, man. It's terrible. I have to go back and listen to the episode again.
Here's a couple of the titles. The Prayer of the Apostle Paul is in there. The Apocryphon of John. The Gospel of Truth. The Treatise on the Resurrection. The Tripartite Tractate. Very fascinating one.
Are these all different writings?
These are different books.
Okay, different books. Okay.
Remember I said there's 52 of them?
Yeah. And
These
you call them
names.
what? You call them the 52 books in the...
Nag Hammadi scriptures
There
that
it
they
is.
found
Gotcha.
in Egypt in 1945.
Okay.
The Apocryphon of John, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Hypostasis of the Archons, the Origin of the World, the Exegesis on the Soul, the Book of Thomas the Carpenter, the Holy Book of the Great Invisible Spirit, the Sophia of Jesus Christ, the Dialogue of the Savior, the first Apocalypse of James, the second Apocalypse of James, the Apocalypse of Adam, the Acts of Peter and the 12 Apostles, the Authoritative Teaching.
And have you read all these?
No.
Okay.
I've just read a few of them, but...
You could have lied. I wouldn't even known. You could have sounded really studious.
No,
like,
because...
No, dude, I've read all of them.
No, but then I'm sure I would have had more examples for you.
Right.
But I don't. But the point is, you can tell based on the titles that there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Maybe. I don't know, man.
Well,
I mean,
there's a lot
of fiction novels. I could say the title's great, and I read it doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah, but these aren't fiction novels.
I know, but I'm just saying I can't base something on being true based on the title.
I didn't say
cool.
true. There's a lot of stuff in there, and like I said,
Gotcha.
I'm sure there's some contradictions.
Right.
But my point is, we should have them all on the table.
Yeah.
So,
Which I'm not opposed to having them to examine and study. I know there's some Christians that would run from the room screaming as if it's some satanic writing and it's going to corrupt my soul. Oh, he's on the Bible, get it away from me. I mean, that's ridiculous too. But that's different than saying these books should be held on the same level as whatever, Corinthians or Romans or whatever. That, to me, that would require some testing and some, you know what I mean, whatever the thing would be. But because we can't just accept every writing that writes about God, right? You're not saying that. You think there's got to be some testing done. Or are you saying everything? Anytime anybody's ever written about God, you could go home and write 35 pages on God, and you think that should line up with all those books you just quoted? Or
no, these books that I'm talking about are from the first century by very well-renowned writers and authors.
So it's a timeline thing from the era.
Yeah,
then. Okay.
There was a lot of groups that were equally vying for the coveted spot in the canon. And similar to today, whoever is the head of the power structure is going to get their way. So if today, if in 50 years they looked back and they said, well, this is why men are playing in women's sports.
Yeah.
It's grandfathered in. Why is it grandfathered in? Well, because
they're women. They're not men. They're actually women.
Because, yeah, exactly. in the time that it was canonized, that's how this power structure resided. And so just because a power structure is in place in a certain time period doesn't mean it has to be like that for eternity.
Right.
And the power structure in place at the time just happened to choose Paul instead of James and all these other 52 books. That doesn't really hold much water.
Well, if that's all it is, then I would agree. If it was just a high and mighty power structure that says, you know what, I'm going to pick these books because I like them. I'm not doing any kind of testing, nothing, anything. I like these 27. Screw everybody else. I'm sorry. Thank you for your entries. We appreciate you in cooperating in the competition. You've all been let go. It's American Idol. We were only taking these 27. The rest of you go home and cry in your beer. You know, if that's what was really happening, then I'd be like, yeah, that doesn't sound very credible to me. That sounds like one person or even a conglomerate of powerful people just picking and choosing randomly what they want.
I think you're starting to understand.
Well, I know that's where you're coming from, but see, when I look into how the canon was put together, I don't see that, and I don't think that's the way it was done.
You're gracious. I'll try to wrap this up. But the main point of Jesus' message was demonstrate love by good works and to work on yourself by eliminating undesirable behavior. So Yahweh's solution was the law and resulting punishments otherwise. Mm-hmm. Paul's solution is no law, and Jesus' solution is the law, but with not radical punishment like the adulteress. When the Pharisees found the woman was an adulteress, they picked up stones, and Jesus said, "Let he without sin cast the first stone." Mm-hmm. Yet he did tell her, "Go and sin no more." Hey, clean up your act a little bit.
Sure.
So
he was pointing out the hypocrisy.
Yeah. So
right.
Yahweh's solution is to pick up boulders, throw them at her head and her ribs and her kneecaps until she bleeds to death or gets knocked out. Pick up the biggest boulder you can find and crush her skull with it. So that's Yahweh's solution. And Jesus said, "You know what? I have a better solution. Let's not do that, and I'll tell her, hey, let's clean up your act a little bit. We'll hold you accountable." So yeah, I prefer Jesus' method.
So what you're saying is you think Yahweh and Jesus are very similar.
Yes.
That's what I'm gathering from what you've been saying.
And that goes into what we were talking about last time.
Right.
But ironically, even though Paul is just railing on the law over and over, he tends to hold on to a few of these laws that tend to be rooted in like slavery, homosexuality, and submission of women. Mm-hmm.
Well, those are good ones to have. That's why. I mean, he grabbed the ones he likes the best.
Oh, let me read them. Women should remain silent in churches. They are not allowed to speak, but must remain in submission, as the law says.
Woo, amen, brother.
Mr. Paul, who says the law does not do jack diddly squat for us anymore. Yeah. He just said, as the law says. So when it comes to women, we're following the law.
Well, where does he say the law doesn't do anything for us? Where does he say, screw the law, it's done, we hate it, it never meant anything, get rid of it all, don't listen to it?
I just read like 10 of them.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't hear any of those.
Oh my gosh.
My ears must not be working because I didn't hear that.
Okay, well, rewind.
I didn't hear him saying the law is pointless, it's worthless, don't ever talk about it, don't ever look into it.
Oh yeah, just hit rewind.
All right.
If they want to inquire about something, they should ask their own husbands at home, for it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in church. Yeah. A woman should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach.
Yes.
I do not permit a woman to teach, he says.
He's specific.
Or to assume authority over a man. She must be quiet, for Adam was formed first, then Eve, and Adam was not the one deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and became a sinner.
You know who loves that verse?
Who?
Feminists. They love that one.
Maintain the traditions even as I delivered them to you. Yeah. I want you to understand that the head of every man is Christ. The head of a wife is her husband. Every wife who prays with her head uncovered dishonors her head. Since it is disgraceful for a woman to cut her hair, let her head be covered. For a man ought not to cover his head, since he is the image and glory of God. But when a woman is the glory of man. For man was not made from woman, but a woman from man. Neither was man created for woman, but woman for man.
So I'm guessing you don't hold to any of that.
So
you don't think any of that's true?
This kind of shows the type of guy Paul is. Mm-hmm. And I think that Martin Luther had it backwards. I think he should have been getting rid of Paul instead of James the Just.
That would have been a lot of the New Testament right there. Paul wrote a lot of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And the reason he wanted to get rid of Revelation, I'm trying to end on this, was because it was too symbolic and wild, but especially because it says a few times that the dead will be judged by their works and their deeds and their actions. And Martin Luther did not like that, because Paul was clear that it was by faith alone. And because in Revelation 22, Paul is alluded to as a false apostle. So Paul, in his writings, testified he was kicked out of the church of Asia and Ephesus. Ephesus was then rewarded in the book of Revelation for kicking out that false apostle. So,
what?
Yep. And in 2 Timothy 1:15, Paul writes, "This you know, that everyone in the province of Asia has deserted me, including Phygellus and Hermogenes." Asia, all of them, with Ephesus being the central cultural center there, they rejected Paul. And when he says, "This you know," because it was common knowledge at the time that the Ephesians rejected Paul. And in Revelation 2:2, it says, "Ephesians, I know your deeds, your toil, your patient endurance, that you have tested those who call themselves apostles and are not, and found them to be false." So if this was so well known, you'd think
So that's talking about Paul, what you're saying.
You'd think the writer of Revelation would have said, "Oh, but not Paul."
Yeah.
But he was the famous one that they rejected. So I think the author of Revelation is referring to Paul.
Well, I'll give you this. I've never heard that before, ever. What you just said. I've never had that connection made before. That's pretty interesting.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. I'm going to throw out my New Testament now, man. You convinced me.
No, not the whole thing.
Just the Paul part.
Just Paul.
Yeah.
So, it just kind of baffles me when I research Paul, why they were so in favor of making him the king of Christianity. Because it's more...
I don't think anybody was in the favor of making him the king of Christianity.
It's
I'm pretty sure
more,
they would still say Jesus is the king of Christianity.
Yeah, but the doctrine is more of Paulianity than Jesus, because
well, again, because you're saying there's contradictions between what Paul said and what Jesus said, which not everyone sees it that way.
Right. Well, they can't. They're not allowed to. Yeah. But it makes me wonder why they chose Paul. Paul was not granted any authority by anyone. He says, "I am Paul the apostle, not from men or through men, but through Jesus."
Yeah.
Says Paul.
Yeah.
That's circular reasoning.
Hey.
I think Paul was a narcissist with delusions of grandeur.
Yeah.
But
you're a huge Paul. I'm really gathering that you're a huge Paul fan. You're big on Paul, I think. Team Paul, as the kids would say.
Yes. Well, I say all this because when people learn about mysticism, spiritualism, esotericism, Gnosticism, all this stuff that I'm going to get into, they typically feel like they can't listen, or they're repelled because it doesn't match what the Bible says. It doesn't match. But the point is, it doesn't line up with what Paul says. It does line up with what Jesus said. And like you said, all those verses are well received by the feminists.
Yeah.
These are the reason that so many people are leaving the church is not because of Jesus. It's because of Paul.
I would agree. And I would agree to a point. But again, I think that what Paul was teaching was in line with what Jesus taught. But I think that what I'm seeing, especially again among the deconstructioners and all that kind of stuff, is they're looking at Jesus as the loving kind of figure. And the guys that are coming with all the rules and regulations, we don't like that. We don't like that. We don't like being told you can't do this, you can't do that. We like this all-encompassing, loving Jesus who's like this hippie guy who's just totally cool with everything, walking around in sandals like South Park presents him. Yay, peace be unto you. And of course, Jesus said that, and he probably did walk around in sandals. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't have rules and stuff. Like, I mean, what about when he made the whips and he whipped the people out of the temple? I mean, that was angry Jesus, right?
That was angry Jesus.
It was. People don't want to talk about that one. They usually, he was having a bad day. He didn't get his coffee that morning. He was a little off. It's like, well, no, that's the same Jesus that you guys are praising for being loving. But see, I think what he did in the temple with the whips was also loving. Because in order for you to show them that they're doing wrongly by God's standards, sometimes you got to be harsh, right? We know this with our children. Sometimes we have to be harsh to teach them something because we love them.
Well, here's something found in the other scriptures. The reason that he was doing that is twofold. One, he was raking the poor people over the coals to purchase an animal to sacrifice.
Who was?
The Pharisees.
Oh, the guy that he was upset with, you mean? The guy Jesus was mad at?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or all of them.
Okay.
And two, it says he released the animals, and he said, if you do not cease from animal sacrifice, the wrath of God will not cease from you. He was not a fan of sacrifice.
So he was a vegan, probably.
Yes. Actually, he was, because he was part of the Essene. He was part of the Essene movement, the Essene group. You know, you got your Pharisees, Sadducees, and the Essenes.
Yeah.
And the Essenes were very not well-known group until all these scriptures came out in the mid-1900s. And now we know a lot about them. And all evidence points to the fact that Jesus and John the Baptist were Essenes.
Yeah.
And they did walk around dressed differently. They dressed in the robes and the sandals, just like we would picture them.
Yeah.
More so than everybody else. And they lived out in the Qumran area of Galilee. And so, the Essenes were vegans, actually. And
Yeah. I mean, but Jesus, at least a pescatarian, right? I mean, he ate fish on the shore there, if we believe that part is true.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he at least ate fish.
Yeah, and some of the writings say that it's a mistranslation that John ate locusts. They said it was the nuts from the locust tree.
Oh, okay.
Because he was in the scene and he didn't eat locusts. But
Yeah. I always love the way the movies present John, too. He's like this snarling madman.
Yeah.
Like he comes out of the forest like, blah, and his beard's all over the place. And he's got just, everything all stuck in his beard. And he just looks like a crazy guy.
Yeah.
Out of his mind.
Yeah.
Which probably wasn't true. I mean, he's probably sounded out of his mind, some of the things he was saying that people didn't like, but...
Yeah. So anything else before we move on?
No, just keep trucking. This is good. I'm interjecting as we go, and we're talking. This is great. All right, man. Fire away whenever you're ready. You have the floor.
Okay. Well, yeah, I left off talking about quantum mechanics, double slit experiment, and the delayed choice quantum eraser, and quantum superposition and entanglement. And that's really tough to explain without videos and charts and graphs.
Right.
So maybe I shouldn't even jumped into it. But the main point is a conscious observer knowing the information of which slit the particle goes through influences the behavior of the quantum particles, suggesting a connection between the mind and the quantum realm. And that's the interesting part.
Yeah.
And that's where you get guys like Dean Radin and Rupert Sheldrake doing a lot of research on that hypothesis that mind and matter are related.
Yeah.
Through experiments in psi phenomenon like telepathy, remote viewing, clairvoyance, precognition.
Yeah.
Dean Radin has demonstrated some of the psychic phenomenon are genuine. He's published 350 articles, 4 books. And just in 2022, there were 3 physicists that were presented the Nobel Prize in 2022 on this same entanglement stuff, and basically proved that these entangled particles can communicate information to each other instantly, faster than the speed of light.
Right.
Which basically proves Einstein wrong, because he said that speed of light is the speed limit of the universe.
Dude, first Paul, now Einstein? Dude, you're making a lot of enemies around here, man. I don't know.
Well, this isn't my opinion, though. They won a Nobel Prize in 2022 showing that this stuff is getting more and more relevant. 5 years ago, studying consciousness was taboo.
Right.
And now studying consciousness
like Timothy Leary and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now it's becoming the norm or celebrated. Like, who's going to tackle this problem of consciousness?
Well, which is great. I mean, provided what they're learning is true and reliable and helpful. I mean, because if those things are true, like you're talking about, like quantum mechanics and the whole idea of everything being, overlapping and all that kind of stuff, dude.
Yeah.
if that's actually real and true, and we can find a way to like harness that in some way,
Absolutely.
dude. Now you're talking about some time travel kind of
Yep.
stuff. That's awesome, dude.
And this is where the off-world entities come in.
Okay, all right, let's hear about them.
No, that's next time.
I like how you think there's no chance we're gonna get to it.
Oh, we'll see. This may be a 6-hour podcast. So this kind of goes into things like near-death experiences,
Okay.
which demonstrate that our consciousness precedes us, and it survives death, because consciousness is fundamental, not the material universe, not the physical matter.
Okay.
Which is where science is at today.
Right.
It's materialistic science. And things like out-of-body experiences and near-death experiences completely tell the opposite story.
What do you mean?
That consciousness is fundamental,
Okay.
and the physical materialism is not fundamental. In other words, science today says that consciousness comes from our brain,
Right.
whereas all the stuff that I'm talking about today demonstrate that consciousness precedes the brain and it survives when the brain is dead.
And when you say consciousness, you're talking about the soul, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Which Christians generally have no problem with.
Sure. Well, you can say the soul leaves the body. I think that's what happens
Exactly.
when we die. So if you're talking about
Exactly.
out-of-body experience,
Exactly.
I got no problem with that.
So I'm going to talk about things that you will probably agree more with than
Okay.
my atheist friends.
Okay.
So I'm in a spot where I've been an atheist, I've been a fundamentalist Christian, and now I'm neither. I'd consider myself a mystic.
Wow. That sounds cool.
Well,
I'm a mystic.
there's different types of mystics.
Yeah.
I
Bob
consider
Marley was a natural mystic.
I consider myself a natural mystic.
You and Bob, huh?
You called it. No, there really
Nice.
is something called a
Yeah.
natural mystic. I think I'm going to get that tat because it aligns with Bob's song.
You have to grow out some dreads, dude.
I will grow out a dread skullet.
Nice. No one's ever done that as far as I know.
I think I've seen it.
Okay. You should still do it anyway.
But yeah, so I don't really align with my atheist friends or my Christian friends. So I'm just kind of floating on my island,
Yeah.
just enjoying it, following the stream of heavens wherever it takes me, best I can. But regarding NDEs or near-death experiences, I learned more about the afterlife in one near-death experience story than I did reading the Bible for 10 straight years.
Okay.
And it's the stuff in these stories that demonstrate what the religious folks kind of don't incorporate in their religion. So, I mean, I'm not trying to trash Christianity. I'm a fan of Jesus and his message, but I read a few books about this psi phenomenon a few years ago and watched a few videos. And once you get on the YouTube algorithm, they just start throwing all kinds of stuff at you.
Yep.
But the next thing I know, I'm watching like dozens of interviews and testimonies about these people's near-death experiences. And one of them was Eben Alexander. He was a doctor. And I heard his story. He was one of the first ones that I heard. And it's pretty mind-blowing. And he was a doctor. And so he wrote a book. So, man, I got to get that book. So I read that book too. I read a book by Bruce Grayson called After. And he's a protege of this guy named Raymond Moody. Have you ever heard of Raymond Moody?
I've heard the name, yeah.
So he kind of started off this whole movement in the late 70s. And he wrote a book called Life After Life. And he got together all these testimonies. And in 1980, a group of researchers was responsible for launching Anabiosis, which was the first peer-reviewed journal within the field. And now this guy named Jeffrey Long, you ever heard of him? He's from the International NDE Study, and he catalogs, I think it's over 6,000 near-death experience stories now.
Okay.
So,
Oh, maybe I have heard of that guy. somebody else was either talking to me about them or I feel like either somebody else was telling me that or I got a video or something, because I feel like I remember hearing a guy talking about that.
Yeah.
About keeping track of all, and he travels around everywhere talking to all these people that have had these near-death experiences.
Yeah, he cataloged so many of these, and you can read to your heart's content, but I think it's better to listen to the people's stories out of their mouth, out of the horse's mouth. They're doing an interview, and just the way they tell their stories is something we weren't able to do, 20, 30 years ago. Yeah. I mean, you can pop in a VHS, but now I can. Right. I've watched 50 of these things now or more. Yeah, and that's kind of new to our technology.
And do you believe all of them, or do you think some people are making it up?
I haven't. The ones that I've seen seem very legit, and I can compare it to what all the other stuff I know. I'm not a rookie at this stuff anymore, so I think I can kind of see through lies.
You've seen enough of the real ones to know when there's phony ones.
Yeah.
Because there's been phony ones, obviously. Admitted phony ones. Like they made movies about the phony ones, like the little kid.
There's phonies and charlatans everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
What was the little kid I'm thinking of? There's a movie. Greg Kinnear played his dad. He's a pastor. It's a little kid. It was a little kid who supposedly died and saw Jesus. And
there's a famous one where a Christian family convinces the kid to tell this stuff. And
that might be it.
Their rendition was just littered with all this Christian jargon from the Bible and from evangelical Christianity.
Which to you would say it was phony.
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
So the definition of a near-death experience is an OBE, out-of-body experience that occurs when someone has died. The brain and the heart are not on. The EEG and the ECG are flatlined. The electroencephalogram.
The body's dead.
The body's dead.
The spirit is outside of the body.
So there's no activity going on in the body. Once the heart stops, the person becomes unconscious, and the brain functions stop just a few seconds later. So there's no awareness, no consciousness. The body gets cold. The person's dead. This is when the NDEs are occurring. Anywhere from seconds into death up to hours after death.
Yeah. Now, why do you think not everybody has that when they die?
I don't know. I think it's like 20% of the people.
Okay. So 20% of people that die come back?
No, 20% of the people who do come back.
They remember it.
Story. They remember it.
Well, because they probably had an out-of-body experience, whether they remember it or not.
That is one of the.
It's kind of like dreams. They say we dream every night,
right?
But we don't remember our dreams every night.
So I think you probably nailed that one on the head.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, like, how many. I guess what I'm asking is, we're all going to die. Our spirit is going to leave our body at some point, right? Yes. And that's going to be what we're going to call physical death.
Yep.
But very few of those cases where people die, because people are dying every day, do we have these cases where the spirit goes back into the body, and then you have people telling what we're calling an NDE, right? They're saying, well, I floated around, I saw my body down on the operating table, and then sometimes they even say, I talked to somebody, and I said, oh, this is beautiful, let me stay here. And they say, no, you need to go back. You have more work to do.
You've heard some of these.
And they send them back. Well, I've had people on the show that have had these. So
really?
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. They've. I mean, again, for me to be able to say I know for sure that they're telling the truth, I have no idea. I wasn't there. That's one of those things. It's like I don't really have a reason to discredit them, but I also can't prove them either. So.
Well, I think when you take them all in a bundle and you compare them all, I think it's pretty convincing. Especially with some of these physicians who are skeptics and atheists. Yeah. It happens to them and their life does a 180.
Right.
Completely changes their life. Like this guy, Bruce Grayson, I was talking about. He's a physician, skeptic, atheist, taught up in the university where it's all materialistic science. And he witnessed it. And the story I always tell is, I think some girl committed suicide, and he's at lunch and he goes in to help, and she dies, and he starts talking to her friend in the other room, and then he leaves and they revive her. He comes in and she says, and he introduces himself. Hi, I'm Dr. Bruce. She says, I know. You were out when I came in. How do you know? She said, I saw you. You know, I was out of my body. I was watching all of you guys. I watched everything you did. I watched you go talk to my friend. I went in the room and listened to what you said to her. And she describes the conversation.
Yeah.
And he's just dumbfounded.
Right.
And she had just been revived, so there's no way somebody could have told her.
Right.
She says, not only that, but I know you have a mustard stain on your tie that you were covering up with your vest. And sure enough, he did, and he covered it up.
Yeah.
So this is a witness from the outside.
Sure. Yeah.
The Dr. Eben Alexander story I told you is from the inside. He's a physician, skeptic, atheist doctor who himself died with an extreme case of meningitis. They gave him a 2% chance of survival, and even if he did survive, he wouldn't recover. He would be a vegetable.
Right.
So he witnessed it firsthand, and his NDE experience came with complete 100% healing.
Right.
So that, in and of itself,
Yeah.
lends credence to the story, because all the doctors said he is beyond recovery.
Right.
Even if that 2% chance that he survives, he's a goner.
Yeah, and it sounds very credible based on that alone, because the only other option is that all those doctors and the people, all the people involved, even if you go back to the girl who saw the doctor's mustard stain and all that, if they all talked about it beforehand, and like, all right, guys, let's come up with a story.
Yeah,
we're going to do this, and then you're going to say that you saw me on the thing. I say, I have a mustard stain here, so I want you to mention that later.
Yeah.
Right? That's a possibility. That to me, that sounds far fetched to go that route with it. Like I in that story, I would be more likely to think, no, whatever she's saying did actually happen. As far as the whys and the hows and all that, that's kind of a different conversation, I think. But I mean, because in that case, I would say, no, I believe personally that girl did have that experience. Right. That she did leave her body. She did see the things she saw. But then again, why? What's the purpose behind that? See, that's kind of...
What's the purpose behind leaving the body?
Well, like, why did it... Because we both believe in God, regardless of who we believe that to be. So, we believe God's in control of all things. So if that's happening, if God's having this girl have this out-of-body experience, and that she's going to go back into her body and tell everybody about it, I kind of think there must be some kind of reason for that.
That's what we're getting into.
Yeah.
But these two guys actually quit their jobs that affected their life so much and went on to studying this phenomenon.
These are the two doctors you're talking about? Okay.
So it wasn't just some kind of that's interesting.
Yeah.
It completely rocked their worlds.
Yeah.
And they said, I need to learn all about this. This goes against everything I've ever been taught in schools. But I have to give a few more examples.
Yeah.
So this mom and her two sons get in a crash. They're taken to two different hospitals. One of the boys dies and revives just for long enough to tell the nurse that it's okay. I see my mom and my brother waiting for me.
Oh, wow.
And then he dies. And they soon find out that sure enough, the mom and the brother had died before this boy at the other hospital.
Oh, crazy.
So another one, a man is anesthetized with his eyes covered. He dies mid-surgery. And looking from above, he sees this physician flopping his elbows around like he's... He described it as like a bird, and he asked the physician why he was doing that, and the physician got kind of butthurt, and the physician was offended, and so they sent back a researcher, and the researcher asked the doctor, "This guy says he saw you doing this
flapping your arms like a bird.
Your arm thing."
Okay.
And the researcher got the answer out of him. He said, well, I was trained overseas where once we wash our hands and get our gloves on, we don't touch anything until we are opening the body. And so we put our hands on our chest and we tell the nurses what to do with our elbows.
Oh, so he was kind of doing this, like a chicken wing kind of thing.
So he was doing this chicken wing thing.
Okay.
And so the researcher said, well, it checks out. That's what the guy said he saw from up above, near the ceiling looking down.
Do you think that's why the guy didn't want to, like, he didn't respond the first time? Because he was like, this is too crazy that he actually saw me doing that?
I mean, I can't be in his brain, but I would have been
We can speculate.
I would have been blown away.
Right.
I would have been like, how did you know that?
Yeah.
But instead, he was kind of offended, and then he took a researcher to come ask him, and he finally told him the question, or the answer.
Okay. Wow.
Another man who had been in a deep coma later told a nurse that he recognized her. He told her that he saw where she had placed his dentures during resuscitation efforts, and then described the cart and where she placed them. And they were precisely where... He said, because they couldn't find him. He says, I know where you put him.
I love that. That's so funny.
So, just things that when you're dead, you don't know where they put your dentures.
Sure. Yeah.
Another one, while flatlined, a young man left his body and witnessed his mother smoking in the waiting room. She wasn't a smoker. She never smoked. And when he was revived, he asked his mom about it. And she didn't understand how he could have possibly seen her.
She was stress smoking, maybe.
But she admitted she was so stressed that she decided to smoke a cigarette.
Wow.
So, another one. A boy had an NDE and saw his sister. He told her to tell their parents. This is during the NDE. He saw her in this ethereal plane. He said he told her to tell their parents sorry for taking out the red convertible despite their consent, or not getting their consent. So the boy survives and tells their parents about his sister. Come to find out the next half hour that she had in fact died in a car crash.
In the red convertible.
In the red convertible. And so he sees her and she's telling him to tell the parents
Was he in the car too?
No.
So what happened to him to give him the NDE?
Oh, he died some other way.
On the same day?
Same day.
Crazy.
Same day.
Boy.
I don't remember how he died, but he survived and he told... And the parents are like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And then within the next half hour, they get a call that your daughter's dead.
They're probably just so happy to have their son back at all because they're worried. My son almost died.
Yeah.
And then a half an hour later, you find out that your daughter died.
Yeah, so these aren't just stories that are totally unrelated. Like, when the common description is, when your brain loses oxygen, you hallucinate.
Yeah, right.
No, it's more than that.
Yes. I know. I hate that when they say that kind of stuff. They try to over-science it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like with this kind of stuff, you say, well, how do you prove that kind of stuff? Stuff that's happening within a spiritual realm. It's hard to prove that kind of stuff.
It's very difficult to prove.
But when you look at logically, this is where we're talking about with logically, I think if you have that many cases away from each other that aren't connected to each other, again, unless you have some big conglomerate of people that's like, all right, guys, let's the 500 of us get together. We're all going to move to different parts of the world, and we're going to give these same similar stories. To me, that's more far-fetched than the idea that it's actually happening.
I agree.
But again, and the question comes back to why. And before we get into that, I want to ask you this, because I've had people that have told me they've had these, right? And sometimes it's a wonderful. They see a light and they see happiness and everything's loving and warm and they I don't want to leave this place. Please don't make me leave. No, you have stuff to do. We got to send you back to Earth. You'll come back here eventually, but right now we need to go back. No, it's so nice. And then I've had other people say it was the scariest thing they've ever done. It was like more of a hell kind of experience where it was screaming and anger and just pain and suffering and all this. And they're like, oh my gosh, get me out. And then they go back to Earth and they're so glad to be back in their body because that scares the crap out of them. And those experiences usually push people into some form of religion, right?
Yeah.
Because it makes them think, oh, heaven's real, hell is real, you know, and they base it all on those things. So my question is always, why do some people have that kind of an experience with it? Others have the other one. Some people have neither of those. They just, like you said, they float around and they see stuff going on in the operating room or whatever, and they just come back in their body and they tell the story to everybody.
Did any of the people that you spoke with have a negative one?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Because that's 1%.
Yeah.
That's the 1%.
It's small, yeah.
It's very small.
Right.
Actually, I'm going to get to that in a minute.
Okay.
My last two examples. A woman suffered a cardiac arrest during her stay in the hospital where I was this researcher. I was the chairman of the psychiatric department. She was unconscious as the resuscitation team tried to revive her. According to her later report, she floated out of her body and stood near the window watching the resuscitation. She observed without any pain whatsoever as they thumped on her chest and pumped air into her lungs. During the resuscitation, a pin fell out of the doctor's pocket and rolled near the same window where her out-of-body spirit was standing and watching. The doctor eventually walked over, picked up the pin, and put it back in his pocket. Then rejoined the frantic effort to save her. They succeeded, obviously. A few days later, she told her doctor that she had observed the resuscitation team at work during her cardiac arrest. No, he soothingly reassured her, you were probably hallucinating because of the anoxia or lack of oxygen to your brain. This can happen when the heart stops beating. Dear.
It's so condescending.
It's so condescending. And she says, but I saw your pen roll over to the window, she replied. Then she described the pen and other details of the resuscitation. And the doctor was shocked. His patient had not only been comatose during the resuscitation, but she had also been 100% blind for many years.
After that?
Before that.
Before that,
Yeah.
she was blind. Okay.
She was a blind individual who's describing everything that happened in the room.
Wow.
Many indie ears see loved ones they don't recognize until they open old photo albums, only to find the person seen was what they looked like in their 30s, even though they died at an old age. So,
See, that's interesting too, because people always talk about like, what are you going to look like in the afterlife?
well, there you go.
And people like to think, oh, I hope I look when I looked my best.
Yep.
Like in my prime, early 20s, I'm all, looking good, fit,
Yep.
Yeah.
You probably get to pick an age.
But what if you die before that? Then you get to see the preview. Like if you die when you're 2, you still get to be the 22-year-old that you would have been had you have not died when you were 2.
Hey, I got buff.
Yeah. It's like, woo-wee. Where I'll look like a bunch of supermodels up there,
Yeah. Oftentimes they're wearing a favorite outfit or hat that they always wore on Earth. And probably so it resonates with whoever gets the message. And these relatives often send a message to surviving relatives that only they would know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to prove it.
Yes.
You
And that's what's the most compelling to me. When it's literally something only that person, there's not a single human on the planet that knows what that person said to them.
Yep.
And got the reference.
So here are some of the common themes in these NDE out-of-body experiences. They're out-of-body. They're seeing from above.
Yep.
It's ineffable, meaning they can't describe with human words, really, or the 5 senses, exactly what they experienced. There's really no way.
Well, because out of the body, those senses are
Their senses are gone.
non-existence. Yeah.
For example, they have 360-degree vision.
Oh, they see all around all the time.
They have 360-degree vision.
Meaning like an owl that their head can spin around, or they can see it all at once.
They see all at once.
Dude, that would mess me up. I feel like that would give me some serious vertigo or something.
Not for them, because they're not confined by this limited body.
Okay.
They see new colors, thousands of new colors.
Which is crazy, because this is... Well, that's a quick side tangent. That's one of the things I talk to people about God. And I say how we are not capable really of anything original. Everything that we create, everything we do is based on something that has already been given to us. And I used colors, for example. I tell somebody, think of a color that doesn't exist. You can't do it. You can only think of a variation of a color that already exists. You can be like, oh, this is a blue-green.
Yeah.
Or this is a whatever, all the Crayola has all these different, burnt sienna and all this. Is like, well, this is like an orangish brown. But they're all mixtures of something you already have. You cannot think of a new color, nor can you create music outside of the scale that we already have. You can create all kinds of different kinds of music, but you can't create a new note.
Yeah.
You can't be like, well, here's an I. No, it only goes to G. No, I made up an I. There's no I. There's no J. There's no right.
And that's why it's considered ineffable. Meaning you can't describe something to somebody who's never seen that or experienced it. These new colors. Well, describe to me the new color. I can't.
Right.
I can't because the way our eyes work, our cones and our rods, we can only see certain colors.
Yeah. Well, even if I was to tell you, describe to me the color yellow, which is a color we both know, you couldn't describe to me the color yellow without
referring
to something that was yellow, or telling me about something that I already know is yellow, right?
One thing most of them describe is feeling at home.
Like a warmth?
No, like literally that's where they're from, that's where they belong, that's where they've been, their entire previous time of existence, and that's where they'll be.
Right.
And this was just a mission,
pilgrimage,
an experiment, pilgrimage,
an experiment. I like that. Hey, let's throw them in there and see what happens.
So, I mean, we feel like we live in reality.
Yeah.
But imagine wearing glasses that are black and white, and then you take off the glasses and you see everything in color. What would you say is more of a reality? Not the black and white glasses.
Right.
So when people come back and they say, it's so hard to describe, but it was more real than this, that's what they mean. We are so limited. Our brain capacity is limited. All of our senses are limited compared to what they experience there, and they feel like it's at home.
Right.
A lot of the people go through the dark room or the dark tunnel.
Mm-hmm. Before they get to the light?
Before they get to the light.
Okay. And supposedly science has explained this.
Oh, of course.
Right? I mean, because you hear them all, that this is why they try to disprove the idea of God or the idea of any afterlife, because they say, no, this is all kind of like what you were saying, a lack of oxygen to the brain and all that kind of stuff.
And they all describe the tunnel in different ways depending on what part of the earth you're from, how old you're from.
Really?
Well, I mean, for example, they interviewed a guy from an Aboriginal guy, and he says, it seemed like I went through a knothole in a tree.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like at parts of the world where they don't know what a tunnel is, or where a car goes through a tunnel, to where someone in New York might describe the subway system or something. Yeah,
a trucker said like a tailpipe.
Okay, yeah.
So they'll describe it differently. But at the end of the tunnel is always a bright light, and the bright light is typically associated with like a spirit guide.
Okay.
And a spirit guide is somebody who greets you and says, hey, welcome back.
Yeah.
Welcome back. It's been a while. How's it going?
Yeah.
And
who does yours look like when you picture that? I hope mine looks like Morgan Freeman.
Mine looks like the Apostle Paul.
So you can talk to him like, dude, you're whack.
Yeah.
I could see Morgan Freeman saying something like that. Welcome
I'm not
back,
a fan of him.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
I was at first, but he just seems so self-absorbed to me.
Oh, dude.
I don't know.
I like him even beyond movies. I think the stuff he says in interviews is great.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's another side tangent.
But there's a surprising number of people who demonstrate humor. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of humor there. There's smiles and humors and jokes.
Like funny stuff is happening and they're laughing during the...
Yeah.
Okay.
There's just humors and just, hey, how's it going down there type of thing. You hanging in there? Because they see it.
Right.
It's just a part of the routine up there. And everything we take so serious that they're like, hey,
it's trivial.
This is what you signed up for.
Yeah.
And here you are. How's it going?
Which makes sense, because even if we live out a full human life, which is what, 90, maybe 100 years for some people, compared to eternity, that's a blip on the radar. It's really trivial in that scheme of things. But we, like you said, we take it so seriously. Oh, I got my job, and I got to get up in the ladder, and I got to make the money to buy the house, and I have the kids, and we take it all so seriously because it's really all we know.
Right.
But then there's probably gonna be some day where we look back on it like, oh, that was what was that? That was a blink. Yeah. That was nothing.
Yeah. So apparently there's these spirit guides who basically orient us back to that area and say, well, you've reached a point where they usually get a choice. You can stay or you can go back.
Right.
And most of them say, this is the most wonderful place I've ever experienced. It's just so full of love and light. I'm home. Many of them see their soul groups or their friends that they've always known for times past. And I do not want to leave. And they say, well, you know that what you signed up for is to be a mother or a father, and your kids are 2 and 4.
Yeah.
Oh, I know I have to go back.
Right.
You know, and they go back.
Right.
All the communication is telepathic. You know, there's no talking. There's no vocal cords.
Right.
It's just all being communicated.
This is a common theme for
This is a common thing. I'm going through the list of common things.
So they communicate just like through their minds, basically.
Yes, which kind of comes back to this whole consciousness thing and the quantum theory, that there's just more to life than just this physical. Some are taught different lessons for what seems like weeks. When they wake up, they said, how long's passed? They're like 45 minutes. It seems like I was there for weeks.
Yeah.
They took me to different places. They taught me different lessons. There's information downloads and immense understanding of the universe that they say they remember.
Yeah.
But when they're being taught this stuff, they're told by their spirit guide, you can't take this back. And they say, no, it all makes so much sense. I cannot believe I didn't understand this in my body. They say, you can't because you're limited in that body.
Dude, that would be so frustrating for me.
They said, I'm going to remember this. And they say, sorry.
I would be like, then stop teaching it to me.
Yeah.
Because it's just going to be frustrating to know. I mean, I'm the earth like, oh, what was that thing? Oh, man, there was that one thing I couldn't remember.
So they come back, it's been 45 minutes, and it feels like they know they had the knowledge of like 3 weeks worth.
Yeah.
And they saw so many places. So time is completely on a different
That's what I say.
scale.
Whatever realm they're in, if they're in a realm outside of time, right? Because they say even the farther, like if you get in a rocket ship and you blast off, and the farther you get away from Earth, time starts slowing down.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think eventually you're going to, I mean, if you could, I don't know if humans will ever be able to do this with a rocket ship, but if you could get far enough without dying, you'd eventually break out of the whole time thing, I would think, and you'd be in the realm of no time at all.
Well, that's just relativism.
Right.
It's all, it's all relative. And
back to Einstein again.
Yeah, what was that movie? I can't remember the name of it, but the guy comes back and he's 50 years older than his daughter or something because of the time differences.
Oh. Yeah, what was that movie?
It's just a one-word title.
Wasn't it the girl's name? Are we thinking of the same movie?
I don't know.
It was like Harrison Ford or something, wasn't it?
No, I think
We must be thinking of
if
different
anybody's
movies.
listening, they're just like, you knuckleheads.
They're probably going, it's this, it's this! They probably know exactly what movie it is.
Yep.
Sorry, grab a little snack here.
Karma is actually a theme.
Karma?
Karma.
How does karma come into play in a near-death experience?
Because they're sitting there talking to their spirit guide, and the spirit guide is basically saying you chose this life based on your previous life, and choosing the next incarnation depends on what was accomplished in the previous life.
Okay.
And so, how did you live your previous life? It's going to dictate what you do in your next one. So
does that kind of go into like reincarnation as well?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay.
Oftentimes there's a life review, and in this life review, you basically are shown your whole life, everything that affected people for the good or the bad. So you're shown these cases where you affected people, and you are going through these scenarios in their shoes. So if you hurt somebody, you're experiencing these actions in their shoes, and it is all There's no judgment from anyone or anything else. It's just yourself.
So if you were a bully to, say, a certain kid and had a crappy high school life because of you, you would have to live that high school life
Yes.
as the kid who was bullied,
Yep.
not the bullier.
Yep. And then in choosing your next runaround, you are probably going to be encouraged to be on the other side of the coin this time around. And that's the whole karma thing.
Okay.
So based on your life review, which is all self-judged, you were encouraged by this council of elders and spirit guides to choose this path now, live that. And because basically what they say when it comes to the soul and reincarnation is that our souls are like a library,
Yeah.
and every life is like a book. So your next one, I want you to take on this task type of thing.
But the problem I have, and this is, like I said, in the last episode I just did, we were talking about this a little bit because he also believes in reincarnation. And usually it's taught that, okay, this is for you to learn lessons and you're continuing to improve upon yourself by living through this thing, and then you got to live through this thing and then this thing. But the problem is, if you're reincarnated and you come back reincarnated again, you kind of start your second life or your third life or your fourth life in a sense. But you don't remember anything from the previous life. So how can you continue to grow upon something if you don't remember the lessons that you learned in the life before? Because I could say it's even just people. Like I live to be 90 and I learn all these things, right?
Yep.
And then I die and then I'm reincarnated as a baby and I'm reborn again as a baby and then I grow up and I do all that. It's not like when I'm 5, I'm sitting there going, oh, I remember all these things I learned in my 90 years in my previous life. Sometimes people have flashes, oh, I remember this one little thing about a previous life, or deja vu. They say, this is why I had the deja vu, because I knew this person in my old life, and or whatever. But there doesn't seem to be enough information there for you to actually be able to continue to build upon the past, like, lessons. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, it is infused and ingrained in the soul.
Okay.
And
it
so
might not be conscious.
It's not
mentally.
conscious, but it's there, and it's difficult to kind of ascertain what you planned on coming here, because especially in like America, where there's just so much going on, it's distracting.
Yeah.
And it's hard to find that place where you dig in and say, okay, well, what was my purpose? What was I supposed to learn? And it's not necessarily always doing stuff. It's not, you're supposed to be doing this.
It could just be experiential.
It's experiential.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or maybe working on, temper or your vices or whatever it is. It's different for each person, but they talk about oftentimes levels of advancement in experience and growth towards source, which is what some people call God.
Right. Like the energy source kind of that we all go back to.
Collective consciousness that
go.
we all go back to.
Yeah.
And the council, the spirit guides, they tend to help people not with force, but with encouragement, like the father of the prodigal son, like Jesus. Definitely not like Yahweh or Paul.
Right.
But this is the message that they keep coming back with.
Sure.
Over and over and over again. There's no question of, did you believe the right thing? There's no question of, did you receive this doctrine or this view? And this is the message of thousands and thousands of people. And most of these people that have these NDEs have never even heard of an NDE.
Yeah.
They just say, the strangest thing happened to me. And they describe it, and word gets out, and a researcher says, you're not the only one. If you want to research this, check out this book. And the crazy thing is, whether they're a Christian or a Muslim or an atheist, it doesn't matter.
Right.
They all have the exact same scenario.
Right.
And that's, to me, is powerful.
Yeah. But I'm going to throw just an out there question for you. And is it a possibility though that you know, if we look like Christianity, we know like the spirit realm is out there, the demons and the angels and the whole deal, right? Is it possible for like it to be like demonic that's causing these things? And if the message of Jesus and the message of Paul, let's say this, the whole Christian package is the truth, right? And if a demonic force wanted to attempt to lead people away from that, they could do something. And let's say they had this kind of power in the spirit realm or in the quantum universe or whatever, to cause a big group of people to have these visions that weren't the truth. Far-fetched out there,
I think that's,
but a possibility.
I think that's very far-fetched.
Okay.
I think that's something that someone defending their earthly religion would say, whether it's a Muslim or a Mormon or Christian or... but the feeling of love and closeness to source is so powerful that it's not fakeable in their words. And
well, I'm not saying they're faking it necessarily. But I mean, what I'm saying is if we have the wrong idea in a sense of what the love of God is, like if we take it to mean like a warm, you know, happy, joyous kind of thing, and maybe if it's not that, then we could assume that. I'm not saying I think people are all lying.
No, I'm saying that the demons can't fake God's love like that.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
But Jesus is actually mentioned quite a few times. He's a bit of a legend in the ethereal planes.
That's awesome.
But yeah, Paul's gospel of him being a blood sacrifice is never mentioned out of these thousands of NDEs. But some Christians might insert that into their story when they start talking about the NDE. But
so you think they're making that part up?
No, it's a tangential inclusion. But when they're talking about the exact NDE, it's not involved. But they'll say, "I saw my Savior who died on the cross for me. I saw him." You know, they're putting that part into what they saw. That's what I'm saying.
But do you think they're actually seeing that? I guess is what I'm asking. Or do you think that they're interpreting it through that lens because they're Christians?
That's the latter. I think they're interpreting it through that lens.
So in a sense, they're adding that part that's not true.
They're adding it, yeah, because they're so steeped in their religion that they still haven't taken off those glasses and seen them through a different lens.
Right. But all the other people that aren't doing that with specific religious beliefs, you hold more credible, in a sense, because you feel like they don't have the biased pre-opinion of certain things that they would view it through.
I mean, when you get a staunch atheist who has a near-death experience and turns his life around and says, "I had no clue that this would happen," he's just telling what he saw with absolutely no bias. Yeah. He's just saying what he saw. I don't know how to explain it, but this is what I saw.
Well, it's the same reason why somebody who hates Christians, who persecutes, like Paul, if we're going to use your favorite person, if that actually was true and that happened, then that's why a story like that is more credible than, like, say, today's thing where somebody's a Christian, you say, well, why are you a Christian? Oh, my parents were Christians. I grew up in the church. This is all I was taught. That seems to be, I'm not saying that can't happen. I'm just saying to me, that's less amazing than somebody who was literally killing Christians last week and then became one the following week.
Yeah.
That's more cause for a pause to say, wow, there might be something to this. Not that, of course, that doesn't mean it's true, but it's more worthy of looking into at that point. For me, anyway. I would be like, whoa.
The same idea is what I'm saying.
Yeah, like if an atheist who's a staunch atheist, Christopher Hitchens, goes to whatever, has an out-of-body experience and comes back and says he's a believer in God now.
Right.
You know, either he's making it all up because he wants to sell a new book called God is Great, or, you know, whatever, right? Or he really did have something happen to him that was so convincing that he completely changed his whole belief system around when he came back to the other side, you know?
So I mentioned Bruce Grayson, Jeffrey Long. There's another guy, Dr. Brian Weiss. I mentioned Dr. Eben Alexander. But I think everyone should listen to at least couple dozen of these first-hand experiences. You can go to Next Level Soul channel or podcast.
Okay.
NDE Diary channel or podcast on YouTube. The Other Side.
Okay.
They just have story after story, interview after interview, and just watching these people say it from their own mouths is something special. There have been some peer-reviewed scientific journals that have published a number of actual medical studies on the subject, but they're inherently very difficult to study, like we talked about.
Again, because you're trying to deal with spiritual elements within a physical study, basically. I mean, if you're going to study it scientifically, medically, those kind of things, you're really just dealing with the human, the physical aspects of the human.
Yes.
How do you study that? How do you study something like the soul? You can't do a blood test on a soul. You can't.
Yeah, I got in a small debate with a guy on Reddit, and he was saying,
That's a good place to debate.
yeah, I try not to give it much time, but he was like, no peer-reviewed paper, no truth.
Wow. But see, those are the people that only think things only exist within the material.
Yeah.
They can't believe in anything outside.
I was there
that.
5 years ago.
Yeah.
I know where you're coming from, but to each his own.
Yeah.
I didn't want to keep going, but the one thing I didn't have in here that I thought I did, but you brought up, were the 1% of tough cases.
Like the fire and brimstone kind of stuff.
But one of these guys, I think it's Bruce Grayson, he talks about it. He says it's very rare, actually. It's about 1%.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, because he says the majority of them are just abundantly filled with love and surrounded by love and warmth and feeling like it's home.
Yeah. But you've heard that term where they say we need to talk about the 1%. We need to talk about the 1%, right? You hear that in conspiracy theorist circles all the time. So to apply that to this, it's interesting, right? So yeah, maybe it's a small percentage of these NDEs experiences, but what does it mean? Like, why? Why do those people have that when the others don't? They have.
Well, you might not like this, but I think Bruce Grayson said he's encountered 23 in his whole career, and all 23 were Christians.
Christians that experienced the hell.
Yes.
Really interesting.
And he says, I don't know exactly why that is. Maybe it's just a coincidence. But he said, I could tell you one thing, and that is the ethereal planes are very suggestive. When you think of something, it happens.
Yeah.
As soon as you go into that plane, if you think of a mountain right there, there's a mountain right there.
Yeah.
It's that powerful. So he says, my guess is that if a Christian isn't living the life that he thinks he should be, if he's living in sin and he's feeling
guilt,
if he's full of guilt and he dies when he's full of guilt, he's going to start manifesting this feeling of guilt and what might happen to him based on what he was told. Yeah. That there might be demons, there might be a place full of guilt, there might be fire. And he says, so guess what they experience?
Hell.
And that's what they experience. Yeah. And his job is to kind of try to pull them out of that. Yeah. And he says, but sometimes it takes longer than others. They all eventually come out.
What do you mean come out?
Of this hellscape.
You mean the near-death experience?
Yes.
Yeah.
They come
Meaning
out.
They don't die after it's over. Like literally.
Out of the 23, he says, before they woke up and their bodies were revived, a percentage of them came out of the hellscape and then actually did meet their spirit guide and things got better.
Oh, interesting. It's like in the cartoons.
Yeah.
Where they're falling down and then you see the little pitchfork guys and stuff, and then you see somebody, you reach their hand and then they pull you back up to where the little fat babies with wings are.
Yep. So I think we can be confident that that's not their new home.
Okay.
This feeling. I think it's brought upon by guilt and the conditioning they received while they're on Earth, and they can bust through eventually as well.
So is this part of why you don't, I think you said this last time, that you don't believe in a hell, like an actual hell?
Correct.
Okay. Is that part of why? Is these NDE accounts?
No, I haven't believed in a hell for 20 years.
Okay.
Based on scripture.
Okay.
We went over it a little bit last time.
Yeah.
But you can go all through.
We talked about Gehenna. We talked about.
You can go all through those, break them down, what their original meanings are, and compare them to the Old Testament. And
right. But when Jesus said eternal hell, what was he talking about then?
Sometimes when he's talking about like fire,
Mm-hmm.
He's talking about the refiner's fire.
Oh, of course.
And the refiner's fire is when you die and you have a lot to work on.
Yeah, that's
so when we pass away,
that's a good thing.
Yeah,
refiner's fire.
Exactly.
Good. Yeah,
it's not hell. It's a refiner's fire.
Yeah, but when he says eternal hell, he's talking about more of a punishment. He's not talking about like the throne judgment or the reward ceremony or any of that. That's all different.
Yeah, well, you got to break it down each verse, but the word eternal is aionios in Greek, and he uses the word abundant for the same placement of words sometimes. So it's like abundant life or eternal life. They're almost interchangeable. But I think he's saying
things.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm saying. Why didn't you just use this word? We wouldn't be scratching our head as much. But when you break it all down, get in the Greek and compare it to the Old Testament use, it is not an eternal hell. It's more of a refiner's fire.
Yeah.
Where when we die with a certain frequency, what they call it, and the frequency is basically a love frequency. Mm-hmm. How close are we to unconditional love?
Yeah.
The higher your frequency, the more close you are to unconditional love. If you're a low frequency being and you're on the other opposite end, when you pass away, like attracts like. So you're going to be in the lower levels of this ethereal plane. And you really don't have access to the higher levels close to unconditional love and light. You can't handle it.
Right.
And that's where the karma and advancing your soul is all about. Next time you come around, you want to elevate yourself in terms of unconditional love, elevate your frequency, your vibration.
Yeah.
Teach yourself to walk around through life just gushing with love towards your family, yourself, your friends, your everybody. And that's what the experience is like, because we can't understand unconditional love without coming and experiencing the unlovable.
Right. That's a good point.
So when we're here, we have a mission,
Mm-hmm.
and it is about unconditional love.
Yeah.
And some people, unfortunately, are going to come here and spin their wheels. Get zero progress. Well, guess what? You're going to do it again until you learn. So for those Paul fans who say, "Oh, I believe, I'm done. I believe, I'm good." Well, I think there's going to be a little bit of wheel spinning going on.
See, and I do want you to know I don't believe that. Like
I know that you
I
don't.
don't think that I don't believe in these like give me my ticket to heaven kind of Christians. Oh, I believe. Let me pray the prayer. I raise my hand. All right, bow your heads and repeat these words after me. And now I'm in heaven, and I'm going to go live like a hellion, and I'm going to do whatever because when I die, I'm in heaven. I don't think that's what the Bible teaches at all. Again, because that faith without works is dead. I think once Christ comes and dwells within you, that's when, because he even says, I purchased you, right? So now we're in a new family, we're in a new spiritual family, we're in the part of the church, and that's where that refining starts happening. So for someone to tell me that they're a Christian, yet their lifestyle is the exact opposite of what Christ taught, I question that. I was like, I don't know if you're actually saved or not. You might, seriously, it sounds harsh, but it's just, and I'm not saying someone who's struggling with sin. That's different. The struggle to me is what shows the salvation. It's the guy that says, oh, Jesus is my homeboy. Yeah, he's no problem. I just went to the whatever. I've been cheating on my wife for 6 months, and he's fine with it. He wants me to be happy after all. Those are the kind of people I'm like, you don't have any conviction about that or nothing? Like, no. Why would I have conviction?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I just balk at the word saved. I mean, what are you talking about saved?
Yeah. Well, it's saved. It's a Christian term. You know this term. Come on, man.
I know the term, but I wouldn't speak like that personally.
Right. Well, because it's not part of your belief system.
It's not part of my paradigm anymore.
Yeah, I have another friend who probably holds kind of more of the... He's the one that first told me about the photon experiment and the,
Oh, you told me about him.
Yeah, so he's an older guy. He's like in his 70s, but he always says whenever I use the word saved, like you're just saying that word, he goes, Ryan, saved from what? What are you talking about? What do I need to be saved from? What do I need, But of course, the Christian answer to that, so I won't go into it. But.
No, it reminds me of something I've heard about Paul's gospel. And one of them goes, Jesus knocks on the door. Hey, I'm here to save you. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm good. Well, save me from what? From what I'm going to do to you if you don't open the door. So that's a tautology. That's circular reasoning here.
But see, that's exactly what the law is. That's my whole point. Like, it's the idea, and I'm sure you've heard these cliche little things, but this one actually kind of has truth to it. Where if you go up to somebody on the street and you say, hey, here's this antidote, you're going to die. If you don't take this antidote, or you need this medicine, or you're going to die. And he's like, what are you talking about? I just was at the doctor. They gave me a clean bill of health. I'm good to go. I'm in the prime of my life. No, you need this medication or you will die. You're going to laugh at that guy. You're going to be like, get away from me. But if you just went to the doctor and you were told you have a week to live, you have stage 7 cancer and you're going to die, right? And then some guy in the street comes up and he says, here, I heard about your stage 4 or stage 7, whatever. Take this. This might heal you. You are going to inhale that as fast as you possibly can, even if you don't know for sure if it's going to work. Because you're like, I know I have a disease, right? To me, that's what the law is for. That's the law showing us that we have a... See, you've heard all this. I know I hate saying it because it sounds so cliche, but it's true. We all have this disease called sin. See, and we need an antidote for that disease called sin, and the antidote is Jesus. You see, and it sounds so stupid.
I've heard it.
But it's so true in the sense because until somebody realizes that they need a savior, like you said, they're going to save from what? What do I need to be saved from? I'm doing just great.
Well, let me give you an analogy. So you buy an appliance, let's say a toaster.
Yeah.
You get home, and the first time you try to use the toaster, it breaks.
Yeah.
And somebody comes in and says, you screwed it up.
Yeah.
Look what you did. Is that valid? Because personally, I would blame the manufacturer, personally.
Sure.
Okay.
So what's the analogy?
The analogy is... the analogy you just walked into was that Adam and Eve are the toaster.
Okay.
They break the very first time.
Yeah.
And now they ruin it for everybody else. The manufacturer, it's the manufacturer's fault, not ours. So the other analogy that I think represents the gospel of Paul is God sent himself for himself to save us from himself, which is another circular reasoning.
Well, okay, let's say that's true, what you just said. Let's say that's actually 100% true. And I mean like absolute truth, meaning whether you believe it's true or not doesn't matter because it is actually true. And you don't. Like, you can argue all you want about how it's not your fault that you have a sin nature and it was Adam's fault, he did this to me, it's not, I'm innocent.
Yeah, but
you're still
reason
screwed.
and logic shows you that it's the manufacturer's fault that the appliance didn't work the very first time you tried
From
it.
human logic and reasoning, we could come to
Human
that
logic
conclusion.
is
Yes.
universal.
Right, but we could come to that conclusion. But my point is, if it's true, that human logic and reason is not going to help you. You still have a disease. You still need an antidote.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't think it's
I know you don't believe it's true, but that's why, for the sake of what I was trying to say, it is true.
I know.
Right? And then we would say, we can shake our fists and God, it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. And maybe you're right in some sense of the word. Maybe you're, again, with the human logic and reasoning. But that's us trying to assume and pretend like we know God's mind and God's motive and everything God's doing and the reason. And we're putting him in a human box and saying, well, if I was to do something like that, I would be called evil, right? And I've heard people use that argument. Well, Ryan, if I was to do this, what would you say about me? And I say, well, I say you're a terrible, horrible, wretched person. And you say, well, I'm just doing what God did. Do you think God's terrible, horrible, and wretched? You see, and they try to make God and humans the same person or the same entity, you know?
Right. But this is why I want to keep going.
Yeah.
Because it describes more about what we can know in this life.
Okay.
Instead of speculating on an old dusty book.
All right. Let's hit it.
Let's hit it.
Where are we going next?
The next one is hypnotherapy.
All right. Making me cluck like a chicken and run around the room.
Yeah, that's at the fairs, the carnivals. I always wonder if I would be a person who could be hypnotized. Because some people...
You've never let anybody try it?
No, I want to go to one of these based on what I'm about to talk about.
Like a real one. You're not talking about like at the Mid-State Fair. You'd be like,
yeah, that's just for showmanship.
Okay.
But hypnotherapy is real, and there's dozens of types of them.
Sure.
The ones that I want to talk about are past life regression therapies and life between lives therapies.
So this gets into the reincarnation.
This gets back into the reincarnation.
Quantum realities.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating because you can put people into a trance-like state and get information out of them that they have no clue what they're saying when they're awake.
Right.
So if you look up past life regression therapy, it'll say, past life regression helps best to understand reasons for attitudes, tendencies, and behavior patterns of a person in their current lives. Repeated life patterns are often echoes of one's past lives. These are believed to occur to help you learn a lesson. They often continue to occur until you have learned the lesson. So they've been proven to be very helpful in this life. But the most fascinating concept is the fact that they are actually learning that they had past lives and learning about who they were. Generally, you're taken into the most recent past life when you go into the hypnotherapy trance.
So let's say you've had 100, 200 different lives. It's going to take you into the most recent.
The most recent, right.
Now, why is that? Could they take you back farther with the hypnotherapy if they wanted to?
Sometimes they can, and sometimes they do.
Is that harder to do? Like you have to have the more experienced hypnotherapist you have is able to go back?
Yeah. The more experienced, the better they are at it. For some odd reason, you can go online and research all about the best ones, like Michael Newton or Dolores Cannon. But a few of these people, like Michael Newton, was a hypnotherapist, kind of standard, trying to find out why you have this mental anguish in your life. Let's bring you back to when you were a child, and let's kind of figure out what started this.
Yeah.
And it's actually pretty helpful. It helps people out. It always has. And then he said this one time, he said, okay, now go back further. And he says, well, now I'm in my mom's womb and it's warm. and he's like, what? You remember this? And he says,
yeah.
Can you take me back any further?
Yeah.
And then he starts talking about his spirit guide and choosing this life, choosing his mom, choosing his dad, choosing the life that he wants based on his previous lives and his karma. And this guy's blown away.
Yeah.
He's like, how did this just happen? And then it completely changes his life, his whole hypnotherapy route.
Right.
And he becomes a past life regression therapist for the rest of his career. And he said it took him like a dozen times of seeing this play out before he became a believer. And then he's done like 500 or more since then. Some of the examples, I'll give you a few examples. So this lady, Shalise, her story in regressions, she is this man named John Harrison. You are not the same gender every lifetime. It's a 50-50 chance.
Yeah. I've seen Quantum Leap. I know the deal.
I know the deal. Okay. I didn't put that together, but I remember that show.
Yeah. Or sometimes he would be a woman or whatever, and yeah.
And he looks down his body. He's like,
yeah.
I'm a woman this
He's
time.
like, hey now.
So she says, my name is John Harrison. My wife is Mary. I am a sailor of trades and goods and assistant to the captain based in Bybeck, England. He was on board a ship in the 1800s until he died when his boat sank. And so they do their best to actually research this stuff. This person who's being regressed has no idea what they're saying, depending on how deep they are in the trance. But they've never heard of this place called Buyback, England, and so they look up this city. Sure enough, it's a city. They point it on the map. It's a port where they trade stuff with ships back in the day in the 1800s.
So it's a city that no longer exists but used to, or at least now maybe now it's called something else.
Correct.
Okay.
And so sure enough, it's where the ships would go out, and they look in the old manifest from back then, and sure enough, there's John Harrison with his wife Mary, and he was a sailor, a trader of goods.
Crazy.
So this particular guy would take these stories and go research them, call them back, and read off what they found. They looked in these old notes from the 1800s. Cool.
That sounds like a good TV show.
It was.
Oh, it's a TV show?
It was a TV show.
Oh, okay.
And so they've just filmed the reactions of these people just blown away. I've never even heard of Buyback England or...
Yeah.
He said, yeah, we had to go to an old map or whatever it was. So another one on the show was in the year 1206 in a town near Jerusalem. This lady names the river she lived by. That doesn't go by that name anymore. She describes the name of the river. She gives the meaning in Arabic. And she wasn't able to have kids. And so they called her Salik, meaning an outcast. And it's an unused word, and it's from 1,500 years ago. So he looks up this word, and sure enough, it was used 1,500 years ago, and it means outcast, like she said. And she says, I sing prayers, and he says, can you sing some of these prayers? And she starts singing in Arabic.
Crazy.
And they confirm that she's singing in some dialect of Aramaic that she has no knowledge of. She's some American girl. And so they play it back, and she's blown away.
Yeah.
She says, I don't remember saying these things, but I remember the feelings. Depending on your state of trance, about 20% of people, or I think Canon Dolores said 10% of people go in the somnambulistic state, meaning you don't remember anything.
Yeah.
Some people remember the feelings. I don't remember what I said, but I remember the feelings that I had. And some people can kind of remember the words. So depending on how deep they go. Well, this girl, Shelise, she said she couldn't have kids. In this lifetime, she donates her eggs to women who can't have kids.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So do you kind of see the connection?
Yeah.
So whether we remember it or not, it's infused in our soul. It's true
of your soul, yeah.
It's there. And so she, out of all the people in the world, she's the one who's donating her eggs. And she said in her past life, she was barren and she felt so bad.
So in the present, she's donating her eggs.
Yes.
And then she goes through this hypnotherapy and she finds out that in her past life, or whatever we want to call that, she was barren.
Correct.
Okay.
Another guy named Julian describes his life as a soldier named Thomas Greywald from Bristol. He knew that the king of the time was King Henry V. He had wife, kids, fighting the French in the 15th century, and said, what are you wearing? I'm wearing white fabric over my chainmail and swords. And this is another one from that TV show where he goes and he looks up all this stuff, and he finds that the stuff he's saying is true. That's what they wore. That's who the king was. And he said he was a killer. He could kill 10 guys at a time. And his current life, he says he's still working on his temper, and he doesn't want that heritage to be passed on to his son and stuff like that. But there was more to this story that they verified, but it's you get the idea from Julian. I didn't write the whole story out. Yep. I ended it with a comma. I was like, where's the rest? Another one, this girl Annika describes 1936 life as her family travels the world working for the circus.
Oh, fun.
And her father...
I want that one.
Her father was a train conductor named Bill Winslow, and she names her 4 brothers. And she said one of them they called Goliath. I can't think of his real name, she said. He just went by Goliath. And so she said the year, she said the names. So he's able to go look up in the Barnum and Bailey yearbook and some articles from the newspaper. And sure enough, there's her dad, Bill Winslow, train conductor. His sons, names the same names she said.
Yeah.
One of them they call Goliath.
Because he's big.
Yeah, he's a big dude. And so just stuff like that.
Okay, so I keep thinking, like, how fun would that be to be the researcher?
That would be so
Like,
fun.
you hear these, you got this date, you got these names,
Yep.
and when you get the hit, and you're like, that's them!
Oh, you know
it's
they're-
right here,
you
all the
know they're-
names are there!
You know they're high-fiving.
Yeah.
As soon as they see the name.
Dude, that'd be so exciting. That'd be just
Yeah.
like the coolest thing, like finding the buried treasure, you know?
Yes, that would be so fun. That's
Yeah.
why we made for a really fun show.
Yeah, I bet.
And this guy, I can imagine this guy doing this for a job and saying, this has to get out there.
Right.
Let's start
Right.
a show.
Yeah.
So,
Huh.
yeah.
So again, I keep coming back to, like, what is the purpose of things like that, though? Like when we talk about the reincarnation and the near-death experiences and the coming back and reliving lives to learn, to grow your soul, or however looking at that, ultimately, what's the goal? Just that we eventually come to a finish line where, like, my soul is as perfect as it's ever going to be. I've learned everything there is to learn. Now I've arrived. Now what?
Well, we'll get into that a little more, but we are considered third density right now, or third dimension,
Okay.
where we can be physical. It's pretty low density. And I was talking about the vibration state, and the highest frequencies vibrate to a point where it cannot be physical. It vibrates so high it can't be physical. And that's kind of the direction we're heading.
Yeah.
And they call them density, root word dense, and you can think of it like water. We're in the state of like ice or water, but as it heats up and it gets more higher vibrations, it turns into steam.
Right.
So we're in a density that is ice or water right now, third density. Once we move on and evolve spiritually.
You mean when you say we, you're talking about the human race
Yes,
as a
the
whole?
human race as a whole. And
Okay.
so it's individual and it's collective. So you go to other planets and their entire race is on a different frequency. So it's individual and it's collective. So
Do you think on other planets there's beings that are humanoid, but they're
Yes.
higher advanced?
yes,
Okay.
or lower.
Or lower.
They're all in a different
Yeah.
state. But so individually and collectively, we're moving in one direction. And eventually we'll be all in all. And
And that's the finish line? Or will there
Well-
always be lower people that are trying to climb that ladder
oh,
always for the rest of eternity?
there will always be people climbing that ladder.
But to what end, though? Like, I guess that's what I'm wondering. Like, what is the goal?
To be all in all.
To be all in all. So everybody starts at a certain place where they're not all in all, but eventually every single person will get there no matter what? Or are there
Yes.
people that will never get there?
They'll all get there.
They will all get there.
Yes.
It's impossible for them not to get there.
Love wins.
Okay.
Love always wins.
Okay.
And that was the name of one of the books that I read a long time ago
Francis Chan.
about
Isn't that Francis Chan?
about universalism. I don't remember the name of the author, but I don't think it was that guy.
No, it was Rob Bell.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a Rob Bell book.
Really? Okay. Because I thought he was the one Love Wins, where that's one a bunch of Christians liked, because he was talking about how hell doesn't exist.
Yeah,
How there isn't an actual hell.
yeah.
I read
Well,
that.
same idea, obviously.
Okay.
But that whole concept reminds me of Return of the Jedi. You remember the last scene where there's Luke Skywalker. He looks over and he sees in the ethereal plane, who does he see? Yoda.
Yeah.
He sees
His dad and Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan,
Yeah.
and he sees his father,
Right.
Darth Vader. That always gave me the chills.
Okay. What about the new one? They come out and they made it look like Hayden Christensen. Did you think that was pretty stupid?
I don't know.
I was like, dude, that's so dumb. Why are you doing that?
But the point is,
Yeah.
who is bummed in that scene? That is an amazing scene that even Darth Vader came to the light side.
There's even redemption for Darth Vader.
And Darth Vader is Satan in this analogy.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Emperor Palpatine is probably closer to the Satan character.
Guess what? He's going to be there too.
You think so?
Love wins.
Okay.
Love always wins.
Yeah.
And in Pollyanity, the vast majority of people go to hell forever.
Right. But we could also say love wins there too. Right?
I wouldn't.
Because in order to love, you must hate, correct? Would you agree with that?
No, I think they can coexist, but I don't think you must.
But like if you love children, then you would have to hate the idea of molesting children or raping children.
Yeah,
if you love women, you would have to hate the idea of rape.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Right. So they kind of go hand in hand toward the opposites of each other.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
But point being is that in sheer numbers, if the vast majority of people go to hell, I would say that Satan wins. But I don't think that.
Well, unless, again, if God's in control of all things, God's sovereign, God is love, right? And then there's consequences for the actions of people, and there's consequences for the decisions, whether it's a human decision that's going to land you in jail or it's a spiritual decision that's going to land you in hell for eternity. I don't know. I could still say love wins there from my perspective.
Yeah.
I would say that sucks for people that end up in hell, but I also think there's free will, and I think we have a choice that we can make. I'm not a Calvinist. I don't think he's forcing anybody anywhere. I don't think there's people in hell that are going to be like, man, I tried to choose the right way, and God said, no, you're not one of the chosen ones.
Wow.
See you later. Yeah. I don't buy into that philosophy. But I guess the idea of you believe in free will.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So and obviously, we even in a human sense, we can see the terrible things that some people use their free will for. And you would agree that on Earth there should be consequences to that, right? You're not saying we should allow the child rapist just to run free, right? You think he should be in jail?
I think he should go through a bit of a refiner's fire.
Yeah. But what if? So on Earth that would be jail time, right? So he'd be in jail, and some people are rehabilitated through that. Some people come out of that, and they come out of there and they live the rest of their lives as wonderful people. But not all of them. Some of them come out and they rape more kids.
Yep.
And they go back in jail for 20 years. They come out and they rape more kids.
Yep.
So some people, it seems like, are not unrefinable, but they're, again, because of their free will, they're not letting that happen to them. I think God wants that for them. God wants them to do the right things and and come back and be forgiven for it and live a good life. But
well, in this perspective, they're going to have a rough next life.
Yeah.
Based on
come
karma.
back as a cockroach or a dung beetle.
Well, they're going to come back as a victim of the exact crimes they were committing in a previous life.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, I know you're compartmentalizing the two views right now. What I'm saying, and you're, the typical Christian view, but for the time being, if we can try to merge them, because we're talking about eternal hell. And then we're talking about NDEs,
right?
And reincarnation. Mm-hmm. So,
which are two completely different belief systems, really. It's hard to merge those two things.
What do you mean?
Well, it's hard to merge the idea of reincarnation with eternal hell. I don't think those two things can really coexist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what I'm saying. When you're talking about merging the two, I don't think that's doable.
Right, but we can merge Christianity with this stuff.
Well, depending on what you mean by Christianity.
Yeah, what type of Christianity?
Correct.
Because there's a lot of different types of Christianity.
Right.
A lot of Christians experience one or more of these things, and then they start calling themselves Christian mystics.
Right.
Like Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah. Who's from Middle Earth, I'm convinced.
Or the most famous one was Meister Eckhart. Maybe that's where he got his name, but Meister
Is that his
Eckhart.
dad or something?
No, this guy was from like the 1800s.
Is it his great-great-great-great-great-grandfather?
Maybe it was him in a previous life.
Maybe. Did he look like a little troll too? I can't get over the way that... I'm sorry, I know that's wrong with me, but I just can't. I think that, to me, he's out of a fantasy book. He should be in Narnia or something. He looks like a fawn or something.
He's
I
an
don't
interesting
know.
character. Yeah. So that was PLR, past life regression hypnotherapy. Mm-hmm. The next one is LBL, life between lives hypnotherapy. Okay. It's an advanced technique that utilizes deep states of hypnosis to access your memories of your experience as a soul. In normal waking consciousness, these memories are hidden, but deep trance permits a connection to be made so that the soul memories can be re-experienced while in human form. LBL sessions are extremely profound and potentially life-changing, so it's usually for the client and the therapist to set aside a significant part of the day to work together. Mm-hmm. You should expect to be in a trance for about 4 hours. Wow. The LBL session is usually experienced as a journey.
How do they keep you under that long?
Some depends on who
do they use like drugs or anything
nope.
for that?
It depends on your personality. Some people can go in really quick. Some people it takes a lot longer.
So it's all natural. They go in and then they just come out whenever they're ready to come out, or is the hypnotherapist keeping them under as long as he needs them to be under?
He's keeping them under as long as he can.
Through hypnotherapy. That he can do even through when they're already out. Like he can hypnotize them even when they're already hypnotized, in a sense, to prolong it? Am I making sense?
It, okay. Yeah. And then once he feels like they're mentally drained, he'll bring them out and say, "Oh, let's do this again."
Because you know what I'm saying, like you see in a thing, you see to watch this, and you're awake when they're hypnotizing you.
Right.
I'm sure this isn't the way they do it, but they hypnotize you, and then you're under. But when you're under, how do you hypnotize somebody who's under to keep them under? If they were,
you don't need to hypnotize them twice.
But I mean, when are they going to come out of it?
When he tells them to come out of it.
So he controls the whole thing. He could leave them under for 4 days if he wanted to.
I think
he has to say the magic word.
I think their physical brain would get so fatigued that they would eventually come out.
Okay, on their own.
On their own.
Gotcha.
So the LBL session is usually experienced as a journey, remembering the trip back home, which is the word they'd often use in the NDEs, after a previous incarnation. It's often surprising how quickly the journey is completed, because when in a trance, time becomes very elastic and non-linear. Mm-hmm. The LBL clients may choose to read Dr. Michael Newton's books, Journey of Souls or Destiny of Souls, and Memories of the Afterlife in advance of the session, but it's not required. So that's what's on Michael Newton's website, what I just read. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I read Journey of Souls by Michael Newton. So fascinating what he brings these people through. So I'll give a few examples. The life between lives is considered home, where your true soul resides. In an LBL session, people reunite with soul groups or their spirit guide for the first time since living on this planet. And it's often very emotional for the client. They'll start crying. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen you in years, or since the last time I was home.
Yeah.
And from these thousands of clients that have been put under in this LBL session, we can learn some things like that Earth is a third density planet, and the ethereal planes contain different levels of dimensions and densities, not in the physical plane. We are neither male nor female in these ethereal bodies, but souls. We have roles and duties, friends, there's fun, there's games, there's hobbies, and there's a lot of learning there. There's council of elders that help guide us on our journey and help us pick the next incarnation based on our strengths and weaknesses and goals. We continue learning and growing between lives, but the learning and growth is accelerated during a physical incarnation. So that's why they're encouraged to come back here, because it's acceleration.
More growth happens.
Accelerated growth, for whatever reason.
In the soul.
In the soul.
Accelerated growth in the soul happens more when you're in the body.
Yep. So, like I was saying earlier, the soul is like a library, and each life lived is like a book. In this ethereal plane or home, we retain our basic soul characteristics or our essence, yet we choose different bodies and lives and personalities for each incarnation for specific reasons. Most beings incarnate on the same or similar planet, but sometimes beings from different planets will incarnate to unique or different type of planet as planned on with the council. Many planets are much more advanced than Earth, and beings from there may come here as wanderers or wayshowers to guide or guides to help raise the vibrations here.
And that explains the few people we've met in our lives that are just straight up weirdos. And we're like, that's why.
Yeah.
That guy's he's like an alien or something.
Yeah.
know?
They say they have a hard time here because a lot of people want to reincarnate to the same planet because their soul is more connected to that planet and they can fit in more.
Right.
But some people, I think they call them hybrid souls. They'll jump from planet to planet.
Yeah.
And like I said, some of them are just far more advanced, so they come here as helpers.
Yeah. I just thought it'd be cool, like movie premise or a novel premise, to have a guy who just like keeps committing suicide, to keep like traveling to different places, basically, because you're reincarnating in these different places, and he just, I don't like this one, gone, go to the next one. All right, now I'm here. Okay, no, I don't want. I'm trying to get to this one place, right? Like maybe he's got a goal. Maybe there's somebody from a previous one that he's been missing for thousands of years, and he's trying to get to that soul that he wants to be with, but he doesn't know how to get there. But every time he kills himself, he reincarnates in a different place as a different person, and he's just going to keep killing himself till he gets to the.
There are so many movie scripts that you can get out of this stuff.
That's an Academy Award winner right there, man. We should start writing that one.
Well, there are a lot of scripts that do kind of do this stuff. Like you named one earlier. What was the one where he comes back as a female?
Oh, that was the TV show Quantum Leap.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, that was way back. What was that, 90s, I think? 80s?
So Earth is one of the most difficult planets to incarnate on, but it offers the most growth and experience. So you listen to some of these hybrid souls, they say, I don't ever want to go back there again. It's freaking hard.
Yeah.
So we got that going for us. Accelerated growth.
Yeah. Yay, Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We learn that we are part of a collective consciousness, that we need to work together and practice service to others as opposed to constantly seeking self-gain and materialism, money, vices. We learn that humanity as a whole is evolving spiritually. One of the main goals is to learn unconditional love. So that's a synopsis of the LBL, Life Between Lives. And the conclusion is that the information confirms and corroborates near-death experiences, past life regression therapy. And this one hypnotherapist, Dolores Cannon, seems to have so much control over her clients that she can just go so deep. She can go to different lives, and she can do this life between lives where she'll ask them, okay, now take me to the end of this life where you died. Tell me how you died. And they describe, they're going through the death process, and they say, now I'm floating above my body. And they go into this NDE experience. So it's an NDE within a hypnotherapy session. Right. And she's saying, I'm seeing the doctor, I'm seeing him working on my chest. And it's incredible. It's layer upon layer upon layer.
Right.
And that's why I think this hypnotherapy stuff is even more intriguing and powerful than just the NDEs, because you can get it within.
Yeah.
So super fascinating.
So it's all interconnected.
It's all interconnected. And some of the stories of these past lives that these clients tell are way beyond their comprehension in this life.
Right.
You know, somebody comes in, they have a fight with their mother-in-law. All right, well, let's regress you. Let's get to the bottom of this. A high school dropout. She's working a dead-end job, not educated, and she starts going off about a topic that she has no business knowing, and she knows more than the experts know.
And that's coming out of the soul.
And that's coming out of this
that she's
subconscious.
Not even cognizant of.
She has no idea what she's saying. So it's so fascinating, and that's Dolores Cannon. I've read about 3 of her books. Michael Newton. I just read the one book of his. He started a network of compiling cases. He's done about 7,000 cases himself. He has
researched, you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
He has about 200 people in this network now. So if you combine it, there's over 70,000 of these interesting LDL cases. Dr. Brian Weiss also is a researcher. The next topic is childhood memories of past lives. Wow. You ever heard of that?
I don't know. Not based on time. I mean, it sounds like things I've heard, but...
Well, we've talked about not remembering things. Well, between the ages of birth and about 5 years old, as soon as they can communicate, that's when a lot of these kids can remember their past lives. It hasn't fully vanished from them yet.
So it starts to fade the older you get.
It starts to fade the older you get. So they typically recall the most recent previous life, and usually the parents are, scratching their head. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Mommy, can you take me to my other family? She's like, what do you mean your other family?
Yeah.
They just go off on this scenario of where they lived in great detail. And then sometimes these parents look into it more, just like that TV show host did, and they find that everything this kid is saying is true. This 3-year-old,
Yeah.
There's no 3-year-old who's a mass deception artist.
Right.
Looks, when the parents leave, he's looking through a history book. What can I do?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So without describing it too much, because it's pretty basic what's going on, I'll give a few examples. This kid, Luke, he's 3 years old. He describes being a woman named Pamela jumping from a window to her death in a fire in Chicago in 2003.
Ooh.
So his previous life was just in 2003.
Right.
So
what year is this that we're...
This is...
that this kid is...
This is recent, like 2020 something.
Okay.
So now he's 3 years old, and he remembers his name. My name's Pamela. I'm in Chicago, and I jumped from a building to my death. So just with that information, they're able to look up, and sure enough, they find the record of Pamela, but she's a black woman, and he never mentioned that. So they come back. They have a picture of Pamela in 2003. They come back with a dozen photos and say, well, first they say, do you remember what color your skin was? He says, it was black skin, Mama. And he had never mentioned that before.
Right.
But he's right.
Yeah.
And so then they come back with 12 photos, and one of them is Pamela, and he quickly says, that's me.
So it's like a police lineup.
Yes, it was like
choose
a police
the right
lineup.
one.
And he said, there's me right there, and he was correct. Wow. So, and he also said, I remember the day that photo was taken.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So things like that are pretty cool.
Yeah.
This 3-year-old is doing this. Another one, Olivia, in a Baptist Christian family. She, from 3 to 5 years old, picked up music quickly and said, I used to be a singer. Described that her family was traveling west to California but was attacked and killed. Her family was attacked and killed by Indians. Only she and her sister Mary Ann were taken away by them. She said she lived with Indians, but she ended up in New York. She said the Indians were very mean to her. She said she also lived with good Indians that loved her, and she used to sing for them, and they would give her beads, and she took care of many of the children. So her mom, she's in a Christian family. Her mom doesn't know what to think of this.
Yeah.
But a 3-4-year-old talking about this, she decided to at least look it up. And she found a book of the life of a woman named Olive Oatman describing the exact same story. So the awful Indians traded her to the Mojave Indians that treated her very well. And the book says she sang for them and took care of all their children. Until white men heard that the Mojave Indians had a white girl, they came to rescue her even though she didn't want to leave that group. And they brought her to New York City, just like the 3-year-old said.
And was she a singer in New York City?
No, she sang to the Mojave Indians.
Oh, okay, but not after she.
And that's why they gave her beads, because she would be the singer from within the tribe. So, just another example.
Yeah.
Here's another example. I don't know, that one's kind of long. This is one of the more famous ones. His name's Ryan Hammonds. He remembers being a Hollywood extra and a talent agent. Ryan was late speaking due to his large adenoids. When he was 4 years old, Ryan's adenoids were removed. Then he started to speak in complete sentences and soon began to relate memories that ultimately were identified with Marty Martin after finding his photo in an old Hollywood book. So they were turning through an old book because he was insisting on it. He said, "There's me!"
Oh, funny.
So he pointed himself out. And it was an extra. He was in the background because he was an extra.
Yeah.
And the movie was Night After Night from 1932.
Yeah.
He's...
So some of this is lending credence maybe to the transgender movement.
How so?
Well, I mean, maybe these people that feel like they're women, that are born men, it's because in the previous life they were a woman.
It's funny you say that because we're gonna get to channelers,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
mediums,
Yeah.
and when channeling, you go into a trance, and you can channel not just grandma or your mom who passed away. You can channel different entities.
Yeah. Do they have to be dead though?
No, because you can channel entities from different planets.
Okay.
And
But like someone in New York right now, could they channel you? As you're alive right now in California talking to me?
I don't know. It's a good question. If so, it's rare.
Okay.
But my point is, when channeling this specific entity, they ask him directly, what's up with homosexuality? And the entity said that if in previous lives, if more than 66%, approximately, he said about, I think he said 2/3, if more than 2/3 of their lives were lived as a woman, and then they come here as a man, they're going to have a much more tendency to be homosexual or a cross-dresser or something like that. And that's what this channeler received from him.
Yeah.
So you bring up an interesting...
Well, it is interesting because they always talk about, we're born that way, we're born that way.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's the critics of that, and I think there is some credence here that a lot of them, when they're willing to admit it, that a lot of them have been molested by men as young children, which can turn them that way because they're the trauma of having your sexuality awakened at too early of an age and from someone of the same sex can tend to do that too. But what you're saying almost kind of, I mean, it adds a whole nother layer to it.
Yeah.
Because here's something that's happened in a previous soul, previous life with the same soul, and the imprint is still on that soul, even if they mentally don't know what happened to them.
Right.
And this is stuff that can come out through some of the therapy that you're talking about.
And I've met some gay people who swore from the earliest on, no abuse, no neglect, great family. They said, I feel like I was born in the wrong body or something.
No, I've talked to people like that too.
And Pollyanity would say, screw you.
Yeah. Totally. That's what Paul said that a lot. Yeah. He was always saying that in the epistles. Screw you guys if you think.
Yeah, basically he'll hold them to the law. If you need to be a woman that needs to be submit, or if you're a homosexual who doesn't understand,
right?
You're screwed.
He's ready to shoot them all into a pit.
Yep.
That Apostle Paul.
Yep.
What a jerk.
But it really only takes one or two examples of somebody who's really born that way.
Yeah.
It doesn't take saying the majority were born that way. It only takes one. So continuing in childhood memories of past lives, this guy Ryan said he was a Hollywood agent, and he made 47 correct statements about this guy Marty Martin before his name was even known. This was just the kid before he pointed him out in the book. He just kept reciting stuff like he lived in Hollywood. He lived somewhere with the word rock or mountain in the street. He was very rich, big house. He had 3 boys. He didn't think the boys were his, but he gave them his name. He had a daughter. He brought her coloring books home after work. He had trouble with his oldest stepdaughter. He had a large swimming pool, had a mother with curly brown hair. He had a younger sister. He bought his daughter a dog when she was 6 for her birthday. He didn't like the dog. He hated cats. He knew Senator Ives. He used to see Senator Ives in New York.
So these are such random memories.
Yeah.
Right? From all the span of the life.
I mean, imagine a 3 or 4-year-old kid just spouting stuff out about his old house.
Stuff he shouldn't even really know about yet.
Yeah. He said, I had a green car. I said, didn't let anybody else drive the green car. He had many wives. His wife drove a nice black car. He was an agent. He ran an agency. The agency changed people's names, like in Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
He tap danced on stage. The stage was in New York. He saw the world on big boats where he danced with pretty ladies. He ate in Chinatown a lot. The list goes on and on. Like I said, he nailed 47 of them. And when asked, how old am I? They said, he's 5. And he says, I'm not 5. I'm closer to 105 when I was here before.
Mm.
And because the guy Marty died at age 61. The assertion that he died when he was 61 is particularly interesting because Martin's death certificate gave him the birth date of 1905, which would mean that he died at 59 in 1964. But further investigation showed that, in fact, he was born in 1903, so Ryan was right.
Mm.
So even things like that. And the very last example is a 3-year-old boy in Thailand who describes how he was shot and killed as an adult riding his bike on his way to his teaching job at school. He knew his name, Buakai, and where he lived. So his grandmother took him to the village, and the 3-year-old stopped her and ran right up to the old house where the same family was living. And they confirmed that their son had died 5 years earlier on his bike on the way to school. They described that he was shot in the back of the head with a large exit wound in the front of his head. The 3-year-old boy had birthmarks both in those locations, with a larger birthmark in the front of the head where
he had birthmarks where the previous soul experience got shot.
Yes. And that's not the only one. There's dozens of those birthmark stories.
So now you wonder whenever you see somebody with a birthmark, you think, what happened to you in your previous life?
Yep. I mean, obviously, some of them are just birthmarks. Some of them, apparently...
Maybe not. Maybe every single birthmark is based on... I mean, if this theory you're saying is true, then that would make sense.
Yeah, that's possible. So, just like the TV guy followed up on his clients, there have been 2 major studies that I'm aware of that followed up all these childhood instances of reincarnation. One study confirmed 40% of them. They said we had enough information to confirm beyond the shadow of a doubt that this kid knows everything about that person's life.
Wow.
Another study, they did a little more research because they had 75% hit rate. And that doesn't mean the other 25% were false. It just means that maybe they didn't have enough information. Or their information was a village somewhere with no major landmarks or no names or no records.
Right.
So the conclusion, again, the information confirms and corroborates the NDEs, both types of hypnotherapies, and that our consciousness precedes life and survives death. And Dr. Ian Stevenson and Dr. Jim Tucker are the most well-known researchers for these.
Yeah. Wow.
So
that's interesting. That would trip me out if that was my kid.
Oh, absolutely.
My kid started saying that. Yeah.
Especially if you're a Christian or an atheist. You're like, I don't believe in this stuff.
Yeah.
But you're kind of forced to deal with it.
Well, I mean, again, I don't know if I think that necessarily flies in the face of either of those things. I mean, because even as an atheist, you could say there's something, because you don't believe in God doesn't mean you don't believe in like otherworldly stuff, right? I mean, you could believe there is no God, but you could believe that there's a spirit realm in the same way you believe in the human realm. And
I don't think they'd use the word spirit, but I agree with you 100% that, listen, if you dive deep into the double slit experiment and all that stuff, and you realize that you're trying to identify the nature of reality could have different dimensions. Right. That's scientific.
Yeah.
That's not religious woo-woo.
Right.
That could be a scientific realm. I mean, Einstein and Schrodinger and Bell and Max Planck and all these guys were physicists, theoretical physicists, and they talked about this stuff. And Einstein was uncomfortable with it. Yeah. I don't know if you remember, he was saying, I like to think the moon is there when I'm not looking at it.
Right.
So he wanted to explain everything in more materialistic realm, but he took Newtonian physics to a whole new level. He surpassed that. Mm-hmm. But let's keep going. You know, let's take theory of relativity to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in reincarnation, the vast majority of religions in the world believe in some form of reincarnation.
Yeah.
So there might be a reason why the vast majority of religions believe in some form of reincarnation.
Yeah. It's because they're all wrong.
Right? But it's not just religions. Many of the early church fathers and philosophers believe in it, like Origen of Alexandria, Clement of Alexandria, Saint Gregory of Nicaea, Saint Jerome. And Jesus didn't prohibit the idea of reincarnation. Remember in Matthew 17, the disciples asked him, why do the scribes say that Elijah must come first? And Jesus said, Elijah does come and he will restore all things. But I tell you, Elijah has already come.
Yeah.
And they did not recognize him.
There you go, dude.
But did to him whatever they pleased. Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them
John
the Baptist.
There's reincarnation, dude.
You
made reincarnation biblical. Wow.
Oh, I think Jesus did. So why doesn't Christianity embrace reincarnation? I'm going to give you one guess.
Because it doesn't fit their mold of what they want. More
specific, there's a guy, starts with a P.
P. Paul.
Yep.
The Apostle Paul.
The Apostle Paul. It was rejected because the Apostle Paul's writing, which claimed that Jesus was a blood sacrifice once and for all. One life, then heaven or hell. Done deal. So Paul's gospel wouldn't allow for multiple lives. Even if someone died as a child, was born into a wretched, short, miserable life, that's it. You just drew the short stick. Yeah. That's it. One and done. So that's why they couldn't allow it. Even though all these early church fathers were saying, no, there's something to this. Mm-hmm. The figures that be, the authority of the time, shut it down for the rest of time, apparently. But it wasn't just a part of religion. The ancient philosophers like Pythagoras and Socrates and Plato and Plotinus all understood the concept of reincarnation. And they didn't, these were the greatest philosophers in history. They didn't believe in reincarnation. They either remembered it or the experience, or they were convinced of it.
Right.
Like Pythagoras remembered 8 of his past lives, he says.
Yeah. Would you say, though, that if reincarnation is real and it's true, then that's a pretty significant aspect of life? Would you say that?
Yes.
Okay, so if that's true, and it's obvious, I would agree, if it is true, then that would be pretty significant. Like, this is what our souls do, they reincarnate as a different... You think Jesus would have mentioned that if that was something that he held to. Yeah, he may not have specifically said anything against it, per se. He didn't say, there is no reincarnation. You won't find those words in the red letters, right? But you would think that he would have mentioned it a few times if it was that significant of a part of the spiritual experience.
Well, it seems like he came with a particular message. He could have said so much more, obviously. Mm-hmm. And I think we all wish he would have said a lot more.
Oh, sure. He didn't say everything there was to say.
Right.
Yeah.
But Yeah, that would have been nice.
But that would be pretty important to let us know.
Well,
if his whole point was to teach us and about things, you think that would be a pretty significant.
But at the same time, maybe he wanted to leave us some things to find out. Or maybe he respected the veil of forgetfulness and he didn't want to kind of go against that. Yeah. Maybe that's what he meant by seek and ye shall find. I don't know.
Maybe.
But I don't think either one of us has a conclusive answer on that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, man. I don't even know where to start with some of these. These don't have to be like long answers either. I mean, you could even say, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I'm not.
Or I don't even remember saying that or whatever, because a lot of it, some people are like, well, he said this, but what does he mean by this? Or.
Yeah, I haven't. Maybe if it's in the context of what I talked about, I'll know, but I haven't been a Bible studier in like 15 years.
Right.
So I might have to go and look things up again.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it's more kind of the philosophical aspects of like this one. He says, and this is quoting you from last time, come up with your best formula, and if something comes along better, then I'll change. It's kind of something, do you remember saying that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, then how can you ever be grounded in anything and stick to anything? Like, how do you...
Yeah,
that
kind of goes along the lines of when you said, so can we ever come to a complete truth?
Right.
I said,
you said
no. And you said, well, then it's a fool's errand.
Right.
And I said, but we can come up with so much more to me than what religion has to offer.
Right.
And what I've talked about today is demonstration of that. We can keep growing and growing in knowledge our entire life. We can go down any one of these topics here and take them to the next level and keep taking them to the next level. So,
but ultimately, how do we know if what we're finding as we go down those roads is accurate and correct and true?
Well, for example, based on what we're talking about, just the last topic about these childhood memories and past lives, I think it's demonstrable that these kids were telling the truth, whether they realized it or not. That's just using common sense and reason and logic, and that will actually take you a long way to finding the path of truth.
Yeah, but so let's say through that we could say, yes, we know this happened. We know that this child somehow has memories of being in another life, right? But there's more than one possible explanation for that, right? We have to kind of fill in the gaps to what we think happened.
Yeah.
Like, so to say that means that this person's soul was living in this other person's body, or the same soul was living as this other person 40, 50 years ago. It's hard to prove that. Do you see what I'm saying? Like to know that for sure is what is difficult.
Well, that's why I like to not dive super, super deep in any one of these topics. Where my mind likes to go is put all the pieces on the table and see how they fit together and complement themselves. Or if you have an oddball that nothing supports, that probably doesn't belong on the table. I'll put it off to the side.
Yeah.
But when you start seeing all these cases, all of these topics, and then where they all overlap, that tells you something.
So it's a quantity thing. It's like if there's majority rules, kind of in a sense.
Well, it's quantity and quality.
Right.
And from my research over the last couple of years, if this was a football field, I think the Bible took me to the 1 yard line in terms of understanding the entirety of the nature of reality. There's a lot of good stuff in the Bible, but there's some bad stuff. It's just one of the pieces, and you just like coming to knowledge in any aspect of life. You just gather the data and you come up with a conclusion based on the data, wherever it leads.
Yeah.
I'm following that string. People tell me, oh, don't follow it that way. We've already been there. I'm like, okay, well, be on your way and I'll be on mine.
But you're basing, like when you say there's some good in the Bible and some bad in the Bible, so you're comparing that with the things you're learning through logic and reason, and that's how you're judging whether it's good or bad within the Bible.
Yeah, taking all the data together.
Right. Okay. And this next one is about like indoctrination. you talked about indoctrinating our children with like I think you're specifically talking about Christianity or any like kind of religious belief.
Right.
So they're asking, aren't any subjective morals indoctrination? Isn't science a form of indoctrination as well, or cultural beliefs indoctrination as well? Like basically anything you're teaching your kids is technically indoctrination.
I think I said it last time, but I think we should teach kids how to think, not what to think.
I agree with you completely.
Because if we teach them how to think, they're going to be able to fend off bogus claims.
Yeah.
And science can be very dogmatic, just like religion. It's the other side of the coin.
Right.
If it's not in this my favorite science journal, I won't accept it. You know, that's
right.
gross dogmatism in itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, let the kids grow up, teach them how to think. And if my kid wants to be an evangelical Christian, fine. As long as you're happy and you're trying to think through it best you can.
Yeah.
I love you.
Is there anything that you could have put at the end of that where you said evangelical Christian that you would say, I'm not proud of you and I hope you do something different?
No,
there's nothing you could put in there? What if it was like a terrible crime or
I would try to walk in Jesus' footprints and say, hey, I love you, I forgive you, but let's clean up your act a little bit. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody stumbles, everybody falls, but like the prodigal son, open arms, you know?
Yeah, I'm not saying you love them any less, but I think that there's a point where you would say, like you just said, maybe we should not do that.
Oh, absolutely.
You just got arrested for murder. Yeah, don't do that anymore. That's not... that doesn't make me proud of you.
That's not how I raised you. We talked about morality.
Yes.
And one of my favorite sayings is quit talking about what it is to be a good person and be a good person. Right. We know enough. Every culture in all of history has some form of standard of morality, religious or not.
Right. Which is interesting in and of itself.
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit.
Yes, we did.
But quit talking about what it is to be a good person and be a good person.
Right. The only reason I think it's important to talk about it, I agree we should be good people, but it's just interesting how what that means to everybody seems to be different without regard to like the main things. Murdering somebody for most people is not a good thing to do. You will find some wackadoodles out there that say it is a good thing to do, but that's one of those things, those major things. But when I have people on here and I talk about that and I say, was murder wrong? They say, well, yeah. What about rape? Oh, yeah. Like, those are all in agreement. But I say, what about sex outside of marriage? You know, then that's people go, oh, well, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Right? So there's always a point where the morality will deviate from mine.
There is, and that's a tough one.
Right.
I mean, if you ask me that question, it's a very tough one. And it's the same with drugs. Mm-hmm. People like to throw all drugs under the same umbrella, but they're not.
Right.
They're all completely different.
Right.
If you experiment with psychedelics with the intent to improve your mind, your status, your nature of where you're at in your soul, you're doing shadow work, as Jung would call it, then that's not a recreational drug.
Right.
It's actually kind of hard work to do psychedelics because you can't control it. It takes you through a process and you have to let go. If you try to fight it, you can have a bad trip.
Is there a danger there though, even if your motive is good? Like you say, I want to expand my understanding or my consciousness or whatever through using psychedelics. Can there be a downside to that where you get results that you weren't expecting? It can damage you in any way?
Well, you're always going to get results you weren't expecting. That's one of the reasons. But
in a good way sometimes.
Yeah, oftentimes in a good way. But you have to do your homework. Mm-hmm. If you come from a family with psychiatric problems, don't do it. Okay. You know, you got to do your homework. But it's not black and white. There's some things like sex and drugs that I tell my kids it's like fire.
Yeah.
Is fire good or bad?
It's in the fireplace, it's good.
Exactly.
Or the bonfire pit or whatever.
If you get an irresponsible person playing with fire deviously, it can be a very harmful thing.
Yeah. Yes.
But if you use it in its place, it can cook your food, it can warm you, it can be a nice ambiance.
Yep.
So there's some gray area in there.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's where just doing your best to raise your kids to know where that
Right.
It's not even a line. It's just being responsible with these things.
And that's why something like sex, I think, is a perfect example of that, because in and of itself is a great thing. It's for enjoyment, pleasure, it's for procreation, it's got all these good qualities and aspects, but it can be used in the wrong way.
Yeah, my junior high said, Mom and Dad can't even have babies anymore. They just have sex for fun.
And they're like, ew.
They're like, that's right. But
and you're like, look, we don't want kids anymore. We're done.
But if my daughter said sex is a beautiful thing and that's why I sleep with other women's husbands,
right,
I'm going to say, excuse me?
Yeah.
You're a home wrecker?
Right.
This is the little child playing with fire.
Yes.
Now you're burning down people's homes.
Right.
So
right. I mean, that's the extreme. Like, you're destroying another person's family.
You're destroying their family.
Right.
Or sex is very emotional,
mm-hmm.
and you can get attached to some bum.
Yes.
Especially
from the female's perspective, right? Generally, they're more emotionally attached, where men are more physical. Generally.
Yeah. So there's no black and white there.
Yeah.
Just
it's nothing but gray. But when you look at let's go back to psychedelics though. Like if your kid, let's say they're 18, they're an adult, and they say, "Hey, Dad, I want to do some psychedelics."
I would do it with them.
You would, okay.
The most bonding experience I've ever had with a human being
mm-hmm.
is on mushrooms together.
Okay.
The most bonding thing I've ever done with someone. And it's not just me. They've done studies with MAPS, and that's an acronym for...
Yeah, I forgot what it means too.
Yeah, anyhow, they give people the psychedelic mushrooms and they interview them every 6 months. And after a few years, they say, what do you think about it now? And they say, it was on my top 3 experiences in my entire life, and right next to getting married and having children.
Yeah.
So it's a lasting impact, and I can vouch for that.
Yeah.
It's very amazing, powerful, but
there have been people that fried themselves with it too, though, right?
Not mushrooms.
No.
It's about the safest
Just
drug
acid.
you can do. Yeah, well, acid's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
Acid's more of a chemical compound, but and even that's rare. That's the fire. You get people who don't do any homework. Their set and setting in their head is
mm-hmm.
off. They're doing it for the wrong reasons. Their vibration's low. They're not happy. Mm-hmm. And then you do a powerful substance like that. What do you expect?
Yeah.
You're playing with fire the wrong way.
Right.
You're not doing it like somebody who's really trying to develop their soul and their personality, and their set and setting and their ambiance is beautiful.
Yeah.
So, yeah, some people are just asking for a bad trip.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's see what else we got here. I only selected some of these. Here's one. If Yahweh is the father of lies, why would Jesus set time aside to pray to him?
He didn't. He was praying to his Father. He made the distinction. Jesus, the only time Jesus said anything about Yahweh from the Old Testament, it was in a negative light. He said, "But my Father," and this is where he was proving people to use your reason and logic here. Mm-hmm. Would a loving father, that's how Jesus started out the sentence, would a loving father do this or that?
Yeah.
Your father does this, this, and this, but my Father is like, so he juxtaposed, what is the
Juxtaposed.
word? He juxtaposed the different fathers.
And when he said your father talking to the Pharisees, you're saying he was referring to the Yahweh.
Yeah, so every time Jesus...
Because the common belief is that he's talking about Satan when Jesus said that.
Yeah, maybe it's one and the same. But every time he refers to his Father, he's referring to a very loving entity. And when they picked up stones to stone that woman, he didn't do what Yahweh would have done. He said, okay, well, I'm changing things here. This is what we're going to do. He without sin cast the first stone. Now listen up. He helps up the young lady and says, change your ways a little bit and get your life together and move on. So I don't think he was talking, well, he wasn't talking about Yahweh. He was talking about the source that I'm talking about.
Right.
The unconditional source, the collective consciousness, that.
I kind of figured that was your answer, but I didn't want to put words in your mouth. Just because based on talking to you before. Because I know you see them as Jesus' father, that he calls his father. You don't see that as Yahweh.
No.
I remember you said that last time.
He easily could have called him Yahweh. He easily could have referred to that God, but he always used the word Abba, or what was it? Just the Greek word for God or Father.
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these questions, it's funny, I probably could have done a better job of kind of just putting these all together and just making one or two big questions out of it, because they all kind of revolve around the idea of how can you ever know what's true? If you're questioning, you're saying, well, we can't trust this, we can't trust that, we can't trust this. Ultimately, what you're saying is you trust yourself to find the right answers, and your litmus test is whether it makes sense to you, whether it feels good in your soul, or whatever kind of thing we put on that.
Well,
right?
That's why I'm glad I got to point out some of these what I call signposts, near-death experiences, hypnotherapy, what we find out from our inner soul, our conscious, our subconscious, reincarnation. These things all support each other. They all corroborate each other. That's a form of evidence. And so imagine you're on a path that they say is the right path, and you're looking for, let's say, a swimming hole. We're going to go find the swimming hole, and we know we think we're on the right path. And then you look over there, and you see people with wet hair and towels. Their shorts are dripping wet, and they're all coming back. They're like, oh no, the water hole is actually this way. These people are all signposts saying the watering hole is actually over here, and these NDEs, hypnotherapy, the reincarnation stuff, and the other like 5 things I haven't got into, they all agree with each other.
Right.
They all agree. And so these are all the signposts saying you're kind of on the wrong path if you're not on the path that these people are pointing at.
Right.
Because they have all the evidence right here, right now, not based on what you think somebody said 2,000 years ago.
Right.
So I'm not pulling it out of thin air. This is
right. No, I don't think you are at all. I think you've researched your position. Obviously, I mean, you're not just sitting there because I like it.
Right.
And I get that, and I have the same issue with Christians who have that philosophy, even though I might believe in what they believe in. But when I ask them why they believe what they believe, if their response is, I don't know, or the response is because my parents were Christians, or because I've been going to church since I was 5, and this is just what I believe, I think, well, then you shouldn't, research it. Like, figure out what you believe. Like, I'm with you as far as my kids. I tell my kids the same thing. Yeah, I teach them what I believe because that's what I believe, but I also tell them they can't have my faith. You need to figure out for yourself. You need to have your own relationship with God, whether that's Christianity, which, I'd be lying if I'd said I didn't hope it was Christianity, because I believe that's true. But I still would I'd rather have them research it on their own and leave Christianity than continue on in it because I'm a Christian.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
because I don't think that's a true conversion anyway, and they're in the same boat. So I'd rather have them exercise their own kind of thought process and their own deal. Yeah,
it's not a particularly easy spot for me right now, because all my Christian friends think I'm cuckoo. All my atheist friends think I'm cuckoo. It's like, well, it's not. I'm not doing this because it's easy.
Right.
It's just that's just how I'm wired. I ask questions, I get them figured out, and I just keep going.
Yeah.
And I can relate to the people who say, well, I'm sticking with what I know. I'm sticking with what makes me feel good, because this life is hard.
Yeah, see, I can't relate to that at all. I can't. I don't.
Wow, you're ruthless.
I can't. I mean, I understand why they're doing that, but for me, for my life, I can't live that way.
Yeah, but you and I are wired a little more differently.
Yeah.
But and I'm not going to judge people who aren't wired like me.
Right.
We're all different.
Right.
But if we don't figure it out this time around, maybe we'll figure it out next time around. I think about what some of these Buddhists say in Tibet. They say you better find your purpose and live your life the way you're called here in Tibet, because if you're not, based on karma, you're going to be born an American next time.
That'd be a punishment.
Yeah, that's a gnarly punishment for the Tibetans, because in America they say we are so distracted and materialistic compared to them that it's so hard to find our way.
Yeah.
We're so distracted by all these things.
Well, they're right about that.
They are.
Yeah.
So, we think we're all sitting pretty in America. Well, this is basically a curse to those in Tibet.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of humorous.
It is funny. Yeah, I like that one. All right, I got two left here. And again, these don't have to be... This one is just referring to... I think this is just a quote from Jesus, but I think I'm speculating here that this has to do with the idea of Jesus being all about peace and love and kind of being the opposite of Yahweh, who's the mean, angry, murderous warmonger. What are your thoughts on Jesus saying, "I didn't come to bring peace but a sword"? What's your?
Yeah, I haven't put as much thought into that as I probably should, but it does puzzle me a little bit, and I did enough research to look through all 52 of those books in terms of what people say that are in them all, since I haven't read them all.
Yeah.
And they say Jesus never says that in any of the other 52 books, which is intriguing. That why would it say it in these 4 Gospels, but none of the other books?
Is it pretty common that when you read the 4 canon Gospels that we would call, that Jesus would say something and he also does say that in the other 52?
Yes,
okay.
And it tends to be the esoteric type of stuff, like the kingdom of God is within you type of stuff.
Right.
He did not talk about that kind of stuff in any of the other Gospels.
Okay.
And they are called Gospels, and they all talk about a lot of the same stuff, but none of that stuff is in there. And I'm asking myself, why isn't it in there if he really said it?
Right.
Is this the scribes doing what the scribes are known to do, which is interpolate and add their own interpretations? And I remember we talked last time about the book of Daniel, where it's really easy to call someone a prophet when you write it after the fact.
Oh, yeah.
So it could have been the scribes interpolating, and that's one of the things that we may never know. Or there may be a different answer where, he actually did say that, and I need to figure out why. But if he did actually say that, I would imagine that he's trying to snap them out of their state where they are living for themselves. His message to me was, you can live your life for others, or live your life for yourself and spin your wheels.
Right.
Now, he doesn't want you lukewarm, stuck in the middle. And in Revelation, when he says to the Laodicean church, "You're lukewarm," he wasn't talking about beliefs. He was talking about actions. If you read it, he says your deeds are lukewarm. Once again, we're talking about deeds, works, commandments, and which is why Martin Luther didn't want it in there, because there's every judgment was based on deeds, in Revelation. So, if he wants us walking the walk, the way, the truth, and the life, it's It's through actions and through deeds. So snap out of it. You know, I've come to, with a sword, to divide the line between people who are living for themselves and people who are actually living for others. And that corresponds with some of these channelers channeling higher form entities who say the exact same thing. And we'll get to that next time.
Yeah.
But they're saying all this stuff comports with Jesus's words. So I really do take seriously the things that Jesus says.
So, okay, so that brings up another question, though. If you're looking at the four Gospels, then, do you take everything that Jesus said in there as something he said? Or is there certain things he said that you're like, well, a scribe probably added that?
Well, I just talked about that, and I don't know.
Okay.
I like to give the scripture the benefit of the doubt when it's red letters, you know.
Right.
But
not with Paul.
It was written a generation after the fact. It was written from 70 AD to 105 AD is what the experts say.
Yeah.
Well, when did Jesus die? In 30 AD?
33, I think, right?
Well, they say anywhere between 30 and 33.
Yeah.
And if you read my book, then you'll see why I think, if there's any truth to the prophecy, that it was 30, because a generation is 40 years. What's 30 plus 40?
70.
70 AD.
How'd you like that fast math right there, dude?
Wow.
You didn't know I was a calculus major, did you?
So yeah, you gotta make time to read that book.
Yeah, I haven't yet. I haven't made the time to read the book yet.
Check it out. I think it'll blow your mind.
I have it. It's sitting right there on my desktop. I look at it all the time. I go, man, I got to make time to read that book.
I think it'll blow your mind a little bit.
All right, one final one. And this, you might remember what this is about. If the church was looking to gain power, why the gospel? The world hates the gospel, but loves the Gnostic gospels.
How does the world love the Gnostic gospels?
Well, it seems like, at least when you go outside of kind of Christian circles, where you get a lot of the people, those are the people that are kind of more promoting that idea, right?
It's pretty rare, but in terms of power, what better way to get a foothold on people than saying, we have the answers, and unless you kind of concede to our gospel, you're on the wrong side of the fence. So pay your tithes, be a good person, be submissive. A lot of it is about getting people to be submissive.
Right.
And what was the other thing? Tithes and power. I mean, that goes a long way. I mean, what more do you need to say? That the church had a stronghold. They still have a bit of a stronghold, but it's diminishing. People love to be told what to do, whether they realize it or not. One pastor that I was a worship leader, and the pastor told me that straight away. You got to do this, this, and this, because people love to be told what to do. It just made me smirk a little bit. But
it's true.
As the power wanes from the church, people are giving that power and submission to the government, which is sad in itself. Because people love to be told what to do. They need permission to seek and search and study.
Right.
They give their power to a certain type of a scientist.
Right.
Just look through COVID. The examples in COVID, how much power these scientists had without evidence.
Right.
There was no evidence yet,
right.
And yet they still had all the power just by saying they did. We're like, well, show us the evidence.
Fear.
Well, we don't have it.
Yeah.
So the government, these scientists, the historical church authority, they use that fear. And also, I admit that Paul's gospel is a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
It's appealing.
Yeah.
It's actually an appealing story. Yeah. And it gives people the warm fuzzies.
I don't know about that. I don't think they like a lot of the, I think that's why people have such a hard time with it. They think it's narrow-minded.
Well, I agree that it is, but if you're in the in group, it gives you the warm fuzzies, because everybody likes some good moral superiority.
Yeah.
It makes people feel really good.
Right.
But on the outside, imagine you're walking around town with a shirt that says black people are inferior.
Yeah. Not going to last very long.
And a black guy comes up to you and says, "What's up with that?" You say, "Don't blame me. My book says it.
Yeah.
Don't blame me. That's what's in the good book."
Yeah.
When you call yourself a Christian, that's exactly what's happening. Hey, what's up? What's up with your message that me and all my loved ones are going to hell? Don't blame me. It's in the good book. Well, explain it. I can't. I don't have to. It's in the good book.
Yeah.
So.
Well, see, and that's why I've already said I don't agree with people that argue that way. So say, I mean, yes, I think to a certain extent you can pass the buck. You know, like when people try to bring someone like Kirk Cameron on the radio show and immediately ask him why he hates homosexuals or whatever, right? That's always where they want to go because they're looking for they're trying to trap him or whatever. And in a sense, well, his first response should be, I don't hate homosexuals. But if you're asking me why I believe a homosexual lifestyle is sinful, then yes, you can say, I didn't make it up because I didn't. I didn't make it up.
Paul did.
It's in Scripture, and you would say, yes, it is, or it's not. Whether what parts
not just
you believe.
Paul's Yahweh too.
Right. But I mean, so that would be the go-to on that. And then the question is, of course, well, is the Scripture true or is it false? And because that really is the question. Because if the Bible says something like homosexuality is wonderful, it's fantastic, it's great, and I'm walking around talking about how it's terrible, and they should all whatever, and I may say I'm a horrible, bigoted person, and I'm like, all these people are terrible, blah, all that, then it doesn't matter what I say or what I think, or even necessarily what the Bible says or means, unless it's true, unless one of the two things is true or false. That's the ultimate what we need to know. And if it is true, then it doesn't matter if I'm for it or against it, or it doesn't matter if the opponent is for it or against it. It's irrelevant, right? So I think that's why we would go back to that. But
I don't think you'll find that conclusion. That's where faith comes in.
Yeah, but again, I think faith is not, and I think biblically, faith is not, people always talk about a leap of faith or to talk about blind faith. I don't think blind faith is necessarily something that's taught in the Scripture. I think it's, true, it doesn't necessarily need to be tangible or something that you can test through the scientific method, but it's also not something that you just say, well, I really like this certain belief, so I'm just going to put my faith in it and hope it's true. And that's the way it's presented a lot. One of the things I can't stand when Christians say, can't stand it. Well, I'm believing God for it. What are you saying? Oh, I'm just believing God for it. What are you even meaning? You want something to happen and therefore you're believing God for it. Did God tell you he was going to give you that? Well, no, but if I just believe hard enough, if I just have enough faith, if I can muster up enough faith, maybe God will give it to me. I said, well, then you need to throw your Bible out because it doesn't say anything like that in there about faith or belief. It's all bogus. That's all churchianity crap that I can't stand. I hate that stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of human nature, though, to if you believe something hard enough, then it must be true.
Right.
As if other people in other religions don't believe just as much as you do.
Yes.
Look at these Muslims praying on their knees 3 times a day.
Yeah.
That is devotion.
Right.
That is commitment.
Yes.
Don't tell me they don't believe as much as you do.
That's why the devotion isn't as important as the object of the devotion, right? That's what's important. Again, back to is it true or is it not true? I mean, just because somebody's willing to die for their belief doesn't necessarily make the belief true.
Correct.
It means that person who's dying for it, they believe it's true enough so that they're willing to give their life.
Yep.
But that doesn't equal, well, then therefore whatever they believe is true.
Oh, yeah, they love dying martyrs.
Right. Right. As a proof.
Yeah, as a proof.
You look at the Book of Martyrs, they look at all these men that died for the sake of Christianity. Therefore, Christianity's true.
Yeah.
I don't go that far.
Good.
You know, I mean, I think it's something to look into for sure. I mean, that's interesting. But you could also say that the far, you know, like the Muslims that are doing suicide bombing and stuff like that, you can say, well, then there you go. Islam is right. Not based on that, it's not. I mean, that I don't think it is based on that. So, but anyway. All right, man. Well, hey, as always, it's a pleasure.
Made it through half of another one.
Half of another one. We're getting there, though. We're getting closer. There. So, but I mean, this will give us more time too next time, because you said you have like 5 more on the agenda before we get to the. So that'll give us more time. I would hate to try to slam all 5 of those into a 30-minute period.
Well, we almost got started on it last time.
Which part?
This whole part.
Oh, the part we're getting to?
No, the part that I went through today. You said, let's go through it real quick at the end of the session.
And then it took us almost 4 hours.
Yeah.
Oh, it did take us 4 hours.
So
it's a good thing that you didn't go for it last time, because I was like, oh, we could probably get through it.
Yeah.
But again, this is me not having any idea what kind of stuff you got over there on the other side.
Yeah.
So, cool.
So we're about halfway through this one.
Okay.
And then there's a whole bunch more to come.
Wow, man. Well, we'll just keep it trucking. You know why? Because this is my podcast. I can do whatever I want with it.
Yes.
You can't have the same guest on more than once. Says who? I can have whoever I want on here.
Absolutely.
You know what? So, cool, man.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. This is, I mean, if anything, this is fun for me. I mean,
yeah.
I'm having fun.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. Don't forget to tell all of your friends, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. For feedback, you can reach me at my email, which is whycan'twetalkaboutThat@proton.me. Thanks.
Wow.
I've never seen a fat cat run like that before. Hey, shut up.